Okay. Hi everyone. So thank you for coming to the Together for Families conference today. So I'm Ria Walton, I'm the research manager, and we're really excited to welcome you all here to talk about parental substance use and whole family support. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start with Donatella, who's going to introduce Harper House. Thank you.
I will wait for the rest of the day. Thanks everybody. Just second what we assess, but we are actually extremely excited and delighted for everybody to be here. We just love to have an opportunity to talk about what we all clearly care about, which is supporting families and parents and children that are affected by substance use. So what I'm going to tell you about is how I prioritize that. But ideally, that's going to take the smallest part of the day. And then actually, I would like to hear about everything else. And I really hope that by the end of the day, we will feel like we took something from it, either anything that we might want to implement in our practice or anything that we might want to use for further development in the future. Harper House, Specialist Family Service in Scotland. We are going to just very briefly go through who we are, a bit about our environment, some of the key elements, and particularly the three main areas of support that we offer that keep the family of the center of our interventions. And then hopefully we will have a bit of time at the end for questions and answers. Next slide, please. Thank you. Who are we? Okay, so Harper House, it was actually designed to respond to and to tackle some of the issues that families face in the community who are affected by substance use. And so the Scottish Government in 2021 offered a large contribution through the Rapid Capacity Programme of 8 million. And of course, Phoenix Futures has added a quite large investment into that as well. We opened in November 2022, so just over 2 years now. We celebrated our birthday just lately, which we loved. And in this time, we've supported over 60 families, so approximately 75 adults and 100 children. And we've also facilitated a few births, 5 births in the service. And I always like to specify, not in the service, in a hospital, but in the service, and so we then had new admissions on the spot, which is always greatly exciting. And actually one of the parents who are going to share today towards the end of the day, she gave birth in Harper House, so we were particularly keen to listen to her story. We are the only service in Scotland that offers recovery support to all mix of families, so that's single moms, single dads, pregnant women, and couples. And they can do that while remaining the main carers of their children. And all of that happens in one setting. Thank you. Our environment, for the ones that are here in person are going to be able to stay here for the whole day. You're going to get a tour. So what I'm saying here might not be as exciting because then you will see it. But for the people that are here online, then it's still good to mention what are some of the features of our buildings. We have 18 fully refurbished en-suite family rooms. We have 2 self-contained flats. Those are going to be the last floor, the second floor. We have spacious shared lounges and dining areas. So far, you've only seen 1. You've had your coffees and tea there, and we're going to go back there for lunch. But we have 4 more shared dining areas. We have additional bathrooms with adaptation equipment and aids, as well as a lift that we've spoken today. Let's not talk about that too much, but we do take pride in the fact that we can support people with mobility. Not today, though. We have a number of play areas. Some of them are external, so this will be large gardens with a playground. Again, you're going to see that too. We have a clinical room, so that's where we will dispense our medications daily. And we have, of course, an on-site nursery. And luckily, Angela, childcare manager, is here today, so she's going to show you the nursery today. For the ones that are doing the tours, I will take the chance to ask to be quite sensible when we do go and see the nursery. The whole building is absolutely fine. We can chit chat, we can stop people and ask questions, whatever you like. In the nursery, ideally, we try and prioritize children's comfort. And so we're going to try and do that part quite fast, but we will definitely allow time before and after to ask questions or discuss whatever. But ideally, we're not going to bother the kids too much today. Next, please. Key features. Okay, so we take pride in offering a safe and inclusive environment. We are non-judgmental in our practice, and so we make sure that people feel truly at home here. We also really care for equity of access, and so of course everybody can access our price regardless of their beliefs, religion, gender, or whatever else. So there is no discrimination whatsoever. We are an abstinence-based program, meaning that our parents will be expected to come off any opioid replacement therapy on any illicit substances, but of course that would not apply to any mental health medications or any medication that has been assessed to be suitable and needed for that person. We do offer the option of a detox. We are lucky because we have an allocated GP in a practice that is nearby. He will come in person every week. He will support with those clinical assessments, starting at assessment time, so before admission, and then continuing on during the whole residential stay of our parents. We do offer up like a flexible program. However, we know that the longer people stay in residential and the more likely they are succeeding in long-term recovery. And so we will encourage 6 months. However, we also recognize that family dynamics can be so complex and so peculiar in their own unique needs that we do need to take into consideration different lengths of program. Sometimes that will be less, but actually sometimes that will be more, which is something that we weren't prepared for. We thought that 6 would be the maximum, and then actually we've had people being here for 7, 8, 9 months, depending on their needs. And of course, during this period in time where we're fully funded, this is an absolute privilege that we have, and we're always happy to offer it. We benefit from a local antenatal pathway as well as a local school pathway. So that allows us to support pregnant women as well as children up to the age of 10, 11, so primary school age, from all local authorities in Scotland. Our program is designed to progress by stages. So our parents, through the 6 months or the 3 months or the 4 months, we will design it specifically for the length of time in treatment. They will go through 4 stages. And the way the stages work, without boring you too much with the details, because I'm sure that everybody will love to tell you about it when they're doing your tours. But it is about independence and reliability. And so parents throughout the stages will learn to be more reliable, will learn to be role models to the newcomers, and will learn to gain more and more independence. To the point of the senior stage, the very last stage of the program, where they will be encouraged to move into one of the flats up the stairs that's self-contained, so that allows great independence within their family, as well as they'll be able to go out in the community to get ready for that transition back, and finally really getting their teeth into what real life is in recovery. And that's the most vulnerable stage of recovery in town. And so because we recognize that that's the most vulnerable stage in recovery, we also offer a pretty long aftercare support. So that lasts between 12 to 18 months from departure from the residential stay. And that will be offered regardless of success. It doesn't matter if you've been here 1 day, 20 days, 6 months, 8 months, you will still be offered the same length and the same amount of support from our aftercare program. And that comes in the form of in-person support when people are local or people can travel, like Laura, or it will come in remote emotional support, as well as we offer 2 weekly online groups. Laura's the best at those as well. It's going to come a day that Laura actually we're just going to facilitate them. She doesn't know that yet, but it is coming. So hopefully you put that in your share for later. And so if we step back 1 second, actually, told about the residential stay and I told you about what happened after, but also what happens before. We really do recognize that families particularly, but anybody that wants to achieve recovery does need a large amount of support to access it. For us, it's particularly relevant because, of course, we have too much research telling us how difficult it is, particularly for women and for parents in general, to access support around their addiction. And so we do have a dedicated person and team actually that takes care of that support prior to admission, and that can last between a week to 4 months, whatever it takes. We will support people through it until they finally come here. And so we really, it's really important that for us the recovery journey doesn't just happen here, but it starts at the moment of knowing the person and it ends at the moment of the person being ready to move on. So it's completely up to them. The next three slides actually are about our three main areas. So interventions, then it's going to be parenting, and then it's going to be childcare. I'm going to try and speed it up because I recognize I'm talking way much more than I planned to. So I'm sorry. Interventions. Okay, so our therapeutic interventions are based on the therapeutic community model. Hopefully, it's not much about you hearing about it, but I really hope that you will see it. You see the people, you see what we do, you see the support that is offered, you see the feel of what this is, because the community makes the therapeutic community. It's not me, it's not Kate, it's not Andrew, it's not the team. It's actually the parents that live here. So hopefully you feel that by the end of the day. And so the therapeutic community model is a evidence-based model. The landmark of therapeutic community is the community's method concept, which means that parents will use the community as a tool to learn about themselves and to change and to grow. And so they will use themselves, they will use each other, they will use their own key worker. And so the community itself will actually offer that way towards change. Structured timetable, you'll get to see a bit of that, but the community members, which is how we like to call it, because they are members of this community as well as staff, they will be pretty much busy all day long. They hardly have a break, which gives you an understanding of what real life is, but also I reckon that the majority of the people in this room would really struggle to keep up with it. It's hard going, and they're quite incredible at being able to keep up with it. And of course, there is a reason for every intervention that they are engaging in. And as long as they are willing to take all of that in, then that's what that structured timetable is about. So it's all about departments, and so work is therapy.
Sorry, we can't see the slides. We can't see the slides.
Not quite sure why that is. 1 second.
I forgot that people can.
I thought they were telling you stop.
You need to share the screen.
Yes, the options and 1 second.
It was 26 when we checked an hour ago. And I don't know if anymore registered.
We wave at the camera.
That's right.
They missed a lot.
From this.
Always technology.
Always.
It's better just to listen anyway, I think.
Sorry, everyone.
Also, did they not see it?
Is
It's a bit for double length.
Is it everyone?
I think they would have heard. Or did you just snap from the?
Is it everyone that can't see that or just one?
Good question.
Because
You can
she
ask
doesn't
the mic.
have, yeah.
Is it only one patch?
Is it everyone that can't see the slide?
We can see them now. They have come up now, or I
Yeah.
certainly can.
Just not. Does anyone have any ideas about how to get it to play?
So from if you put it from beginning or from current slide, and then you can
Yeah.
just click through them. So on the left hand side,
Yeah.
or you
not-
can try presenting teams up the right hand corner.
Yeah.
We could even just, yeah, if they can still see them, even just like this. That's odd.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to just do it like this.
Can
Can you see that okay online?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Structured timetable. Yeah. Groups, peer support, routine, all that sort of benefits. Okay. Trauma-informed approach. Of course, we recognize that trauma is often a cause and an indicator of addiction. That is, again, particularly relevant to our community. We know that that's particularly relevant for women. And although, I will always say, we also support gaps, we do also have to be realistic. And we do have a majority of women and, of course, children. So again, trauma-informed approach in the way we communicate to people, but also in the way we identify a care plan for every specific family is absolutely vital. So our parents can also benefit from a named key worker and 24/7 support. So we will have a therapeutic team that will have their own caseload of individuals, and we will have a care team that will offer support also throughout the night. So we have 2 waking staff at night as well. So the building is always staffed at all times. We have a registered mental health nurse in the building. She also facilitates some of the groups as part of the timetable. She will deliver groups on anxiety and groups on depression. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, we benefit from a GP that can come to the service weekly in person. Next is parenting. Now, on this, I cannot tell you too much because I've got people that will tell you everything about it. So actually, Sharon and Jenny will be talking, I think, straight after me. So I'm going to tell you very little about parents under pressure because I cannot compete. Of course. So we, as I said, we support families of all makes, and we use the Parents Under Pressure program. What I will tell you about it, though, is that it is incredibly ideal to our type of community and what we deliver here for a number of reasons. One being that PAP was designed to work for parents who experience layered challenges. And so those could be financial strain, addiction, mental health, family disruption, etc. And so maybe needless to say, but these are exactly the challenges that our parents experience. And so even just because of that, that is absolutely perfect. But what I remember when Jenny came in for the very first session, for our first cohort of staff members, I remember sitting in that room and feeling like it was so incredibly similar to the therapeutic community model. And the reason for that is that both TCs and PAP actually work with the person, their own strength and their own view of self and their own history and understanding how that impacts them today. And so perhaps the TC will do it for recovery, but PAP does it for parenting. And what's incredible about that is that these 2 interventions work at the same time together. There isn't one starting and one ending and the other one starting. They work at the same time, creating such a comprehensive set of interventions right there. And so we are incredibly proud of being able to deliver that. We, of course, promote through Parents Under Pressure. And in general, I like to say that it's just the way we are. People that have been experiencing this service quite a bit will be able to know what I mean when I say that it's just a way of being here in Upper House. It's not just signing up for a certain theory of practice. It's about actually being that. Being those people that try and do their best, at least being compassionate and supporting and creating those positive bonds amongst each other, between parents and children, between parents and other parents, etc. And so we offer PAP both in one-to-one parenting sessions and in group sessions. I think the group session is probably the favorite group of the community. It seems that particularly that's becoming a thing. They cannot wait to go to that. They absolutely love it, and so we never miss that. And then, sorry, I actually missed one bit here, the generational preventative model. What do I mean by that? We are conscious that adverse childhood experiences can be transmitted through generations. And so what we try to do here in Upper House is not only to support the parent with the recovery, it's not only to support the child in their developmental outcomes, but actually it's about stopping that cycle in very simple words. It's about actually preventing those ACEs to continue to be transmitted across generations. And the parents here, that's exactly what they're doing. And I don't think they always realize that. And I don't even know if the team sometimes realizes that. But when you take one step back and really look at the big picture, you realize that's exactly what's going on. We're stopping that cycle. If you look at the history of our parents, that's a cycle that has been going on for decades. And so it's quite interesting for them to have that power to stop it right then. For us, it's incredible, of course, and we take incredible pride in that. And really do our best to have them realizing that that's the type of work they're doing, because that's incredibly inspirational, isn't it? Thank you. Next and last, childcare. As I said, we've got a fully care inspector registered nursery. And so that means that we have 2 care inspector registrations. We will have 1 specific registration for the adult residential and then 1 registration for the childcare center. In the childcare center, we welcome children that are nursery age, so usually between 0 and 5, and as our manager. We have a quite high staff ratio, which allows us to support 32 children at all times. We have 2 rooms. You will get to see that. One will be a baby room, one will be a preschooler room. But as I also said, we have links with the local school, meaning that children up to the age of primary age can be admitted to the service. They can go to the local school, or if they are pretty close by already, we will be able to maintain the school placement while they're here as well. But at least it's about offering the opportunity and really removing as many barriers as we can. We have, of course, a childcare team that will be also allocated as a key worker for the child specifically. And so at the same time that the parent will have their own key worker with their own care plan, the child will also have their own key worker and their own care plan. And then oftentimes we will meet all together to really get an understanding of how the family is doing. And finally, we use, of course, an attachment strengths-based model, and we benefit from a health visitor that also comes to the service. I'd like to say just once weekly, because that's what was the understanding originally. I think Sandra's more in that than I actually. She just loves it. She just comes in and gets a coffee and she chats with everybody. But it's great for parents to really feel that support is right there, available at all times. I think that's everything from me. Again, maybe I told you even too much. And hopefully you'll get to know more and see more throughout the day. But I do think we can take questions for a few minutes.
A couple of questions,
A couple
maybe.
of questions.
Questions.
Okay. Okay, so you said it was funded by this £8 million, I think you said. But do you have continued grants to continue the funding?
Not right now. So the funding will run up until 2026.
Okay.
And then, of course, this is probably what we're doing today as part of the looking into evidencing what we do here. And so the idea is that if we have enough evidence, then we will be in a good position to request more funding. And if not, we will have to look into different pathways.
Yeah, considering that Scotland's not doing very well with funding right now.
It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, there will be a challenge, yeah. And you mentioned you have absence-based program, and do you allow opiate substitute therapy?
Yes, but still there will be understanding that that gets reduced to 0.
Just on the back of that last question, what is the criteria if somebody needs a detox as part of their program?
So the criteria would be 80 ml of methadone and 16 meg of Asprenor. However, we are quite open to be flexible, and the reason for that is differently than any adult residential, we also have to consider things such as somebody being pregnant or somebody just having given birth. In both circumstances, we would have to really be flexible with those numbers and with the timing. And again, particularly because we are so lucky to be Scottish, funded by the Scottish government, it does allow us to be flexible even with the time frame. So if it was to be that perhaps there is a bit of a higher methadone there, but an understanding that the person will be keen to stay here for a bit longer, then we're more than happy to offer that too.
Would you take people on Buvidal?
Sorry?
Would you take clients on Buvidal?
Yes, we would work collaboratively with the addiction service that they come from, and we will support them in the community to get to their last dose, and then they can come here. Anything else?
So how do you make a referral, and who refers for your?
Anybody, anywhere.
Can people self-refer?
Yes. Yes, we take referrals from all local authorities. For people that know me, they know that I like to keep count. There's 34 local authorities in Scotland, and we're at 18 local authorities, considering that we started with 2. I'm very excited about it, and I'm counting. I've got a note of it on my arm, actually. So yes, lots of local authorities refer in. We can get referrals from, well, literally anybody, the person themselves. It could be a family member, it could be their health visitor, the GP, their addiction worker, their social worker, etc.
And what's the pre-assessment kind of time scale? How
We can work pretty quickly. We actually done some great training because for the longest time we haven't had many referrals. And so that led us to be creative. And so we can get things moving very fast as long as the person is there and is participative. But of course, it will depend on the specific circumstances. There will be times where perhaps there is a risk that has been assessed to be pretty complex, and therefore it might take a bit longer just to make sure that we've got everything in place for that family. But yeah, otherwise we can be real fast, like we're talking about a week or two. So yeah.
Does that work for pregnancy?
Yeah.
Early on in pregnancy?
Yeah. Yeah.
On back of that question was very good. Do you have a waiting list? And if so, how long is it?
We don't have a waiting list
You
just now.
don't have a
I
waiting list.
know. Tell me about it. Unacceptable. Yeah, I would love a waiting list though, because that tells me that I've got a lot of referrals. No, we don't have tons of referrals, and therefore we do work fast because we do want to make sure that those people then get the support they need right away. But perhaps if we had 50 referrals, then I would have to have a waiting list.
Yeah.
How much? What is your capacity here?
20. Thank you so much. That's a great question. We can have up to 20 families.
And I know some residential units have exclusion criteria based on complexities, but also criminal justice backgrounds. Do you operate a
Similarly, yes.
approach?
There will be circumstances where we wouldn't offer placement. Extremely rare. I hardly can even think of any referral that I've knocked back. I'd always rather look at it and let's try and work together.
So case by case.
Case by case. There will be things, and perhaps we can talk about it later. There will be things where it might be quite tricky, particularly if there's any issues with the children dynamics, or I can try and think of examples and I'll let you know. But in general, I would say we recognize we are the only service in Scotland doing this. So I can't be too precious. This is either this or nothing for some of these families. So yeah, no, we will be flexible as much as we can.
If a parent is working towards reuniting with their children, children are being looked after elsewhere, can the parent move in first?
Yes.
And then with
We actually have somebody coming in tomorrow, a single dad. He's coming in on his own with family time set as twice a week right now, with an understanding that will increase by the end of this program. So ideally the goal remains full-time care, but we are keen to have that transition period.
And just last question, can a person's family visit them?
Yeah. Yes,
So
weekends from 12:30 to 4:30, anybody can come in to visit. It would be a request system, of course. That's not too wishy-washy. Oh yeah, no, just exactly that. In a plan way. Yeah. Open door every weekend. Anything else?
Thank you, Donatella.
Thank you.
Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Great. Do you want to share? Shall I share the screen with you, or shall I pull up your slides?
I am happy to have a stab at sharing my screen. You're not in presenter mode. You know that. Well,
Yes.
perhaps you are for where you are, but for us online, you're not in presenter mode. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yes, there was some difficulty. It wasn't allowing me to do that for some reason.
That's okay. It's all right. If people can see it clearly enough, it doesn't really matter.
Okay,
Unless you want me to share my screen.
that's okay.
Don't mind.
Should we keep it like this?
I think
might
probably
lose it again.
since we've got partial good enough, let's proceed. Well, hello everybody. Good morning to you. Evening for me on the other side of the world, down here in Australia. But delighted to be joining you and noticing that there are quite a few familiar faces actually on screen and online. So that's very nice. I was asked to put on my professor hat rather than my pup hat today, although I haven't totally taken off my pup hat. I'm more putting on my research professor hat, which is how do we go about ensuring that we're doing rigorous, robust evaluations? And so I know that there are many people in the room there and online who are very familiar with research evaluations, but perhaps there are some people who are less familiar, and I'm hoping that this will be a useful kind of checklist, I guess, for those of you. Next slide, please. So there is enormous amount of enthusiasm for doing an evaluation. Is it evidence-based, et cetera, and there are very good reasons why we do evaluations. It does help with service improvements and service delivery. It lets us know whether we're doing something that needs to be tweaked or changed. And it's increasingly imperative for further funding. So there is growing importance, I think, in the field generally, both in the UK and here in Australia for evaluations. But next slide, please. There's good science and there's poor science. And good science involves some key constructs. So we need to have something that has key constructs that are targeted by the program or service. What I see a lot in the work that I do and the grants that I review, the theses that I mark, is often that there's a disconnect between what the program is targeting and what the measures are measuring. So there is very little point in measuring something that is not a target for the program. You need to have a research design that's feasible. You need to have a clear theory of change. What is it that you think is going to happen and why does it happen? And you need to have psychometrically sound measures. And I will come back to this, but it's a really, really important component of a good evaluation. You've got measures that actually measure what it is that you're wanting to see change. And the converse, of course, is true here for poor science. You see kind of like this odd selection of measures that don't really seem to have any bearing on the program model of change. Measures that have poor psychometric properties and poor quality research design. So next slide, please. So what are the key constructs? And what I thought I would do is just use the Parents Under Pressure program. Many of you are familiar with that as a way of illustrating how one would go about developing a research proposal. So first of all, what's the key outcome? What does the program or service want to achieve? So, you know, if you're wanting to deliver a program that's around immunization and you want to increase rates of immunization, then obviously you want to record immunization. Likewise, if your key construct is breastfeeding, then that's what you want to measure. But if your key construct is actually maternal sensitivity, why would you measure breastfeeding? So we've got to be really clear about what it is that the outcome is. And then we need to have an understanding of the role of mediators and moderators. And that becomes a slightly sort of technical, statistical question, but we need to have some idea of the pathway. Mediators, and we need to have some ideas of the things that are going to influence whether something will change or not, and that's the moderators. So we need to have some idea about the pathway. Next slide, please. So let's have a little bit of a think about the PUP program. So what's the overarching program logic? If we were to zoom out, as we often say in PUP, if we were to zoom out, what is our overarching goal? And our overarching goal is to help children achieve their potential, for children to be the best that they can be. So that's immediately telling us that our key outcome has something to do with child developmental outcome. So how do we get children to be the best that they can be? Well, we say that there's something very important about the quality of the caregiving relationship. And so as the family environment becomes more nurturing and less conflictual, and there's an improvement in emotion regulation, this will in turn flow on to improving child developmental outcomes. So there's a very clear process of change, theory of change here that has been articulated in the overarching program logic. Next slide. And then you move down and drill down a little bit and say, well, what's our theory of change? So there's a program logic, and then there's this idea of a theory of change. And Jenny's going to talk about this following, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can see from those dot points there that if you're reading through them, you'll get a sense of what the theory of change is. What is it that we think is going to improve child developmental outcomes? And if you go on to the next slide there, what you'll see is the program logic. And this is actually on the Parents Under Pressure website. So it's available in the public domain. And you can really drill down and start saying, how do we think this is going to improve child outcomes? What are our proximal outcomes there on the far right? And what are our distal outcomes? Sorry, I'm just messing around with my slides here. There we are. So we've got child outcomes in the short term, improvement of executive function, improvement of self-regulation. We've got longer term family outcomes, which is around developmental outcome involvement in statutory child protection services and improvements in family functioning. And there you'll see, how do we get there? What are the mediators of change? What are the roots, if you like? And then what are the moderators? So let's move to the next slide. This is the PUP integrated theoretical framework. So this is the theoretical model that we use to determine whether, to work out how to engage with a family, what the family strengths are, what are the family challenges. And we look at various aspects of the family ecology, if you like. So we've got a theoretically integrated framework that draws from child developmental, child psychology and development, obviously in the right there, moving through to an understanding of the importance of attachment, moving through to the blue circle to understand the importance of family knowledge, values and expectations, routines. Encompassing that is parental emotion regulation, connection to family, and then the wider ecological environment. So next slide, please. So if I were to set up an evaluation for residential services, which I would dearly love to do, where would I start? And so I start off with, if you like, a statement of the problem. So what is the overarching problem that we need to address in this research? Well, we know, actually, because we did the systematic review from HEL, where we ended up with 99 studies and 22,000 participants. So we know that out of all of the studies published right up until 2022 in both the grey literature, so not just journal articles, but in the grey literature, as well as in chapters and theses, that almost none looked at child outcome in residential settings, which was astonishing to me. Huge literature on predictors of success in therapeutic communities, very large literature following up people who've been in therapeutic communities. But when you actually say for those therapeutic communities that offer residential services for women and children, how many do we have? And in fact, 3, as you can see there. Stevens, 98, very old. Stover, Carla Stover's was actually fathers only, and then there was the 2005 PhD thesis. So we don't actually know anything really about whether residential treatment facilities that include a focus on children and allow residential children to live with them are actually going to improve children's outcomes. Next slide, please. Which really I think is quite astonishing. So I have developed a set of questions and ideas to illustrate how you would go about developing a research proposal. So the first thing that you want to do is, after the statement of the problem, a clear review of the literature and an understanding of where the literature is at the moment. You say, yes, there is a need for this particular research project, is to identify key outcomes. So you may say, well, we want to improve children's outcomes. We want a reduction in child maltreatment, for example. And then how are we going to get there? Here we're pulling in our program logic. We're going to improve parental self-regulation, which leads to an improvement in the quality of caregiving. So we've got a nice pathway model there. Increase in parental self-regulation improves quality of caregiving, which in turn improves child's developmental outcome. Next slide, please. And that is nice, and it fits nicely with the theoretical framework where we're going to start with what is our ultimate goal, which is to help children be the best that they can be. Next slide. So, as a researcher, the next question is the potential constructs that need reliable measures. So what is it that we think might improve? In the context of a residential treatment facility that has children, young children at the stage where there is language acquisition and where we know that there is many children who've been exposed to neglect, and we know that neglect is associated with poor language development. So it seems very reasonable that one of the constructs you may want to measure would be language. You might want to measure children's problem solving, executive functioning, which underpins self-regulation. You could go in that direction, or you might just want to go straight to child behavior. The advantage of having 2 outcome measures is that you've got a kind of multi-method focus there, but you don't want to have all 4. You need to say where do we think we're going to get the greatest benefit in this particular research program. Next slide, please. So then we say, well, we want to, in order to get an improvement in child developmental outcomes, we're interested in both parental emotion regulation, and we're interested in the quality of the caregiving relationship. So here we might be saying, next slide, how do we measure quality of caregiving? What are we going to do? We're going to measure parental sensitivity. So there's our construct. Then our next question is, how are we going to measure parental sensitivity? We're moving through our integrated theoretical framework here. We're up to values and expectations, parenting knowledge, monitoring, family routines. All of these are also going to influence child developmental outcome. And so our question is, well, what are our constructs? Next slide. So would we be expecting a focus on parenting routines and skills? Would we be expecting a focus on an improvement in predictability? Would we expect a focus on monitoring? So again, we need to identify what is the construct And once you've identified the construct that you're expecting to change, we want to identify the measure that is going to be reliable and valid. Next slide. We have a very explicit focus on parental self-regulation as part of our theory of change. So it makes a lot of sense to have a good, strong focus on parental emotion regulation. We've said previously that if you improve parental emotion regulation, you're going to improve quality of caregiving. So we need to test that explicitly. Next slide. So we want to have measures that tap into the construct of parental emotion regulation. So we might measure parental emotion regulation itself in something like the DERS or the CAMSR. We might say, okay, one of the consequences of dysregulation is psychopathology, such as depression, anxiety, and stress. So there your DAS would jump up. You could measure depression specifically. You could use a measure of depression, a BDI, and you might use an anxiety measure, etc. You might be interested in coping skills. So how is it that parents cope? Slightly more distal from emotion regulation, but by and large, parents with good emotion regulation also have good coping skills. So are we likely to see a change in those constructs? Next slide. And then again, when we're thinking about the PUP model, you may well want to say, do we want to measure connectedness? And this is where you would do a lot of pondering and thinking, because you don't want to have a really complicated design unless you've got many dollars and a lot of time to do it. But it may be, for example, that in a therapeutic community, the quality of the relationship within the organization, the structure of the residential community, is a predictor of child outcomes. So there may be something around therapeutic alliance, there may be something around connectedness that you might want to think about measuring. And wide world problems. Next slide, please. To what extent are you interested in what goes wrong? And it may well be that families who leave, who are homeless, families who have poor social support, families who are disconnected, are more likely to do poorly, and in turn have children with poorer developmental outcomes. Again, you're setting up your story. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to shift tack just a moment here, and I'm going to do a warning about generalist measures. And I'm going to use the outcome star as an example of how it can go wrong. Government is very invested, sensibly so, in having a single measure for an organization or for an agency or for a particular kind of service. Wouldn't it be helpful if everybody gave exactly the same measure? The HONOS is one of those measures that is used in Health of the Nations outcome scale, that's used in mental health. The SDQ, Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire, is used across CAMS services, both here in Australia and quite a lot, I think, in England. They're not exactly generalist measures, though. The SDQ, as you'll all be familiar with, is a very is a measure of a set of behaviours that are and pro-social scale, pro-social skills for young children. So it's not quite a generalist measure. What we've done in the social sector, social services sector, is develop a couple of different generalist measures, and the outcome star is one that was actually, pretty sure it was developed in Australia. It was widely used across England. Everybody got very keen. It was mandated. But to be honest, for somebody in my position who spent a lot of time bothering and worrying and stressing about psychometric properties of measures, it was pretty obvious from just from reading the work on the website that the outcome star was really not psychometrically robust. And so I've always had major concerns about the use of that. And yes, it was developed and tested by a social enterprise company, and it looks on the face of it as though it's got reasonable psychometrics, but actually it doesn't. You don't have to dig very deep to work that out. Not surprisingly, the Early Intervention Foundation in the UK expressed significant concerns, and in 2020 there was an evaluation of the outcome star by Queen's University in Belfast. So it's got very, very poor psychometric properties. I don't know of any measure in our field that would be a useful generalist measure. So that's a really big warning. As keen as government may be to develop something that's so efficient, it's actually going to tell you very little. So next slide, please. And this is my final slide. Don't waste time and resources on a poorly designed evaluation. Please. Be clear about what it is that you expect to change. And then work out what your measures are that are going to tap into those constructs. Don't flood your research design with measures. You know, sometimes I see projects, proposals where there are actually more measures than participants. That's very poor research design. You're casting your net very wide. You haven't specified what your constructs are. You haven't got a clear model of change. And you know, if you cast your net wide enough, you're going to end up with something. But you know, whether you've got a significant change in 2 out of 20 measures, really from a research evaluation is pretty unpersuasive. And it's really burdensome on participants and on staff. So who's collecting this data? Who's filling in these measures? How long is it taking? What is the literacy level of the people who are completing them? Have they been used in similar populations? Some of the measures that I've seen in some of the more recent family evaluations are designed for people with at least a tertiary qualification. The literacy level, the constructs are really very abstract and require a level of cognitive processing that really is very burdensome for the participants. Make sure you've got a strong psychometrician on your evaluation team, somebody who's able to go away and say, yes, we're happy with the construct and convergent validity. We're happy with the internal validity. The factor structure shows up. It's been demonstrated to be sensitive to change across A, B, C, and D studies, all of which are similar populations to the population we're using. If you're going to have a qualitative analysis, you need a good qualitative researcher on the team. And I am a very keen advocate of mixed methods design, so having both a qualitative and a quantitative approach. I think people's stories are important, and I think it brings a richness to your data that really can't be underestimated. So go forth and evaluate. Do it carefully, do it in a considered fashion, and it doesn't actually have to cost millions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do.
Maria.
When do you take these measures? I know you have to take them at least twice, but how far out do you take it, especially for the children as they grow up, if you want to find out the impact residential treatment for them?
A question for your evaluation team. You want a baseline. You want people as soon as possible. As soon as people get into your setting, you want people to measure. You want to take measurements. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I won't do the measures yet. I'll let them settle in." And you go, "No." You want measures. You want the measures to be taken at the point at which people enter, when they're at their worst. Give your evaluation a shot. So don't wait till they settle in. Then the next question is, well, what are we likely to see in language development? Well, what are we likely to see in parental sensitivity? Little kids do acquire language, particularly if the language is very poor. You would expect a 4-month to 6-month period where you would see an improvement in acquisition of language in a 3 to 5-year-old, 2 to 5-year-old age range. Obviously, you're not going to see much in a 6-month-old baby. So you'd want different measures if your group is predominantly infants versus children who are in early childhood. So again, look, the more measures you've got, the stronger your design. The stronger your design, the more it's going to cost you. If you can do a follow-up post discharge or post leaving your residential, that's your strongest design of all. And that really is just thinking about a pre and post design. So that's without consideration about, well, what are our control groups? And that goes into a whole different talk. But at the very least, it's really fair to do a pre and post design. If you've got a large enough sample size, you can look at some of the predictors. You can look at your pathways and you can look at your predictors, because not everybody is going to do as well. So it may be that you've got some ideas about what is what is going to make things worse for families, or what are our indicators of poor prognosis.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you, Sharon. I'm sure it's nearly 10 p.m. I think for you in Australia, so we'll let you go, but thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody. I wish I was there, but I'll leave you to it. Bye.
Okay, Jenny. Hello.
How are we doing for time? I'm really conscious of, you said to us all, could you just take 10 minutes and we're all like...
Yeah, we're a little behind, we might catch up.
I'm aware of people who are coming after, and I feel like the second billing and we're already at 12 o'clock. So
we can rejig slightly, don't worry.
But hopefully quite a lot of what I'm saying will just neatly slot into some of what Sharon's done. So there'll be some bits that I'll kind of assume a little bit of knowledge on and skip with. But I think what I just wanted to say was, I'm sitting here kind of thinking how much I really, really love my job, because my job is to be the bridge, I suppose, with the work that Sharon and the team at Griffith University, I call PUP HQ, are doing, and working as a trainer across sites in Scotland. So I'm a social worker by profession. I think I'm a family support worker. I have been for 35 years. I just don't actually do family support work anymore. But my front line, there's quite a lot of lovely people in this room, but my front line is staff who are implementing the Parents Under Pressure programme with families. So I wanted to, the bit that we didn't actually say, which I should probably just, when people do PUP training, one of the things that Sharon and the team there kind of said quite early on is, if we're going to support people to implement this approach in practice, then we can't just do 2 days of training and say get on with it. So there's a kind of 6-month tail of implementation support. And in the same way, so everything that we're saying about tailoring interventions to families, we model that with the training. So we tailor the training. The framework is the framework, but the way that looks in Harper House will be different to the way it might look in Prepare, who is speaking next. It might be different to the way it looks in Circle, I'm looking at Aileen. So it's really, that's the beauty of it anyway, is thinking, how do we take an approach and think about how it best fits in different settings. So I am going to talk a little bit about the kind of ethos of the PUP approach. And of course, the other thing that's really obvious is that Sharon is speaking there as a clinical psychologist in an applied psychology department. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a social worker. The majority of us who are implementing PUP are addiction staff, family support staff, social work staff. And I really, really love that kind of role of, I sort of see myself as being a bit of a bridge between those two. And it goes both ways, because over time, Connie and I were chatting earlier, and it goes, over time, things like the group work programme in PUP was born out of the collaboration over years with Kumai, which is a therapeutic community service in Ireland. Initially, PUP was designed as an individualised tailored programme to families, but over time we can see, okay, it works when you bring peer groups together. And so now PUP HQ take that on board and we have a group programme module. So it's interesting to see how that is a collaboration over time. It's very, very much at its heart about whole family support, but we work with the parent. So the outcomes for children come from working with the parent. It's not to say there's not a lot of observation of parent and child or young person together, but the person who the work is primarily done with is the caregiver. It's very much about thinking that when we, and I align this with a lot of I haven't written the promise and the national guidance in Scotland around child protection on the slides. We think about the ethos of the way we're positioned in the Scottish landscape. This idea that where we have child protection concerns, where we see neglect, it signals the need for support. Yes, it signals a concern, but it signals the need for support. And we're thinking about how do we support the whole family? How do we build relationships? That the relationship building itself is a therapeutic intervention. To come alongside somebody, to validate them, to hear from them is part, and you can tell I'm passionate about it, but I think that kind of, when we talk about the importance of relationship building, it can sound quite glib, and actually it's the fundamental part of supporting change. And what I'll say a little bit about is this idea of a case formulation approach, that's where we can tell it's come from psychologists, but we're embedding in an approach to a therapeutic family support model, a way of thinking. If we want to be able to be flexible, then we have to have a kind of a way of formulating the support so that we're being clear about why we're doing what we're doing for people and helping them understand that as well. Lovely. Let's move on. So that's where this is where I can assume a little bit of prior knowledge, because Sharon just showed you this. And as she said, it's a way of kind of trying to visualize bringing lots and lots of different theories together. So that's why it's called integrated theoretical model. Let's move on. I'm going to take you through it. And the way I'm going to take you through it is to say how, so I kind of, when Ria and Donatello and I were thinking what would be helpful for me to say, we titled this bit as helping the programme of PUP in half a house. What does that look like? And Sharon sort of described this in terms of if you were trying to think about how you measure outcomes and what the outcomes you're achieving with each of these domains of intervention. What I wanted to show you is what that looks like in practice. So when somebody comes to half a house as a caregiver, a parent, and they come into PUP group, and Donatello was saying how the PUP group is, and it's brilliant that every parent who comes comes into PUP group. And then some of them will also get an individualised programme of PUP depending on what they need and what the plan is for them. But I wanted to show you kind of what is that? What are they getting when they come in? So when I go through each of these layers, I'm trying to sort of build up a picture in your minds of how we're helping somebody start to make sense of what can potentially feel quite overwhelming and complex. So some of what I've got in the top of the slides are kind of what the aim of having a focus on this particular domain is. And then here at the bottom are some of the ways that we're starting to talk with people about that particular area of family life. So if what we're kind of trying to conceptualize is that at any point in if that line going across the middle is a child's development at any point from pregnancy through to 18, and we hit the pause button at any point in their childhood, in their development, pregnancy, infancy, childhood, young personhood, how are they doing? And so we're engaging in conversations where we're saying, you tell me, I'm not the expert about your family life in your child, you tell me. So very early on in our assessment conversations, we're inviting parents to say, this is something that feels quite a strength, or this is something I feel quite worried about. It's a challenge for me. Do I feel my child can communicate well? Are they healthy? Are they strong? Do they have friends? So we're asking questions about developmental outcomes in a language that is
is tapping into everyday conversations about let's talk about your child. Let's move on to the next slide. And then when we're interested in the quality of caregiving, we're wanting to move away from sort of people being scrutinized and judged about what are you doing, to try and understand what's the quality of the interaction between you. And the way we do that is we use the work of Zeynep Birinci around emotional availability. So in PUP training terms, practitioners who do PUP training kind of almost start to envisage a little framework within this yellow section of the PUP framework, where we're talking about, are we seeing sensitivity? So these are our constructs of emotional availability. Are we seeing sensitivity? What does that look like? Are we seeing emotional structuring, that kind of emotional scaffolding of interactions? Are we seeing intrusive or non-intrusive parenting? Are we seeing hostility or non-hostility? And what are we significantly seeing in the infant, in the child, in the teenager, in the way that they're responding to their caregiver? What's the quality of emotional interaction that we're seeing there? So we're asking a lot about when you're with your child, how does that feel to you? Do you get feelings of anxiety or stress sometimes? If you smile at them, what happens to you? You notice them smiling back at you. We might use video, we might use photos. We're engaging in wanting to understand or wanting to observe the kind of moment by moment quality of interactions. Let's move on, thank you. And then there's a kind of piece that, you know, the feedback often from practitioners, from parents, is that this piece around what kind of a parent do you want to be? What are your hopes? What are your beliefs? What are your dreams? What gets in the way? It really, really matters, and it's so easy to not have that conversation, to not think about what are your beliefs and values? Where do they come from? And what, you know, did you have any choice about becoming a parent? Chances are maybe not, but what are your choices about the kind of parent you would like to be? That kind of idea that, you know, we only realise our own full potential if we can stop and have a think and vocalise and name what our hopes and fears are. So we're thinking about the kind of the day-to-day bit of parenting. If we can, so the idea of these first two domains, these first two circles, is that they're the direct influences on child well-being at any point in time. But what we're also saying is that underpinning these day-to-day parenting qualities is this idea of a parent's view of themselves as a parent, the meaning of themselves as a parent, their expectations about themselves, their expectations about their child. She's doing it to me deliberately. Well, she's a baby, she's not doing it to you deliberately. But it might feel like that, and that's a really valid feeling. But if we can name it, then we can unpick it and think about ages and stages of development, rather than having a punitive or a kind of scrutinizing response to that. It's not okay, but let's understand why it's happening. So how would you like your child to be when they're older? What's important to you? What are your values? What matters to you in family life? Okay, thank you. And then, as Sharon said, we're thinking explicitly about a parent in their own right. So we're asking questions around how do you manage your feelings? What happens when you get stressed? What happens if you feel sad? What happens when you get angry? How is that for you? If problems come along, what does it feel like to try and solve them? How do you manage that? Is that a challenge? Is that something that works quite well for you? What makes a difference to that? So there's a really, really explicit focus right from the outset on the inquiring about that and inviting a kind of reflection around that, at the same time as then thinking, how can we target that? How can we help you learn strategies to become more calm, to develop impulse control? Because we're seeing that as a direct parenting skill, making this absolute link. That kind of theory of change was that if we can support emotion regulation and better problem solving, we can help people learn how to feel more in control of themselves. Then that emotion regulation allows for the possibility of being more emotionally available, so we can work on both at the same time. And let's move on. And then we're thinking with people about who is in your life, in the past and the present, your connection to your own family of origin. What's the meaning of that to you? Is there a sense of connection and belonging, or is there a sense of alienation for people? Are you living in relationships that are threatening and dangerous to you, or do you have support and safety? Who would you turn to? We're asking questions around who would you turn to when things are difficult? Do you feel connected? What does culture and community mean to you? What does that look like? So that we can get a really clear sense of that as well. And lastly, we're asking about what are the day-to-day problems that you're facing, and are there any resources that you have available to you or could have available to you that could support you in relation to those. And we may not have when we know only too painfully well the impact of structural inequalities and things that as a workforce we can often feel quite powerless to change, but we need to know what's going on for people. We need to understand, we need to ask those questions. We need to help people articulate their day-to-day challenges and think about what might be a meaningful response to those. So in practice, if we move on, as we're working with parents, we're bringing in quite explicitly sometimes. So parents have their own resources within PUP if they choose to use them. There's a huge amount of flexibility in whether you do or don't use physical materials, or whether it's all done through conversation. But you can see the language is got the difference competition. But this is the same integrated framework, but with language that instead of saying emotional availability, it says loved and nurtured, family warmth. So we're using this as a way of helping parents think about there are many things. Parenting is really hard. All of these things are impacting on you and on your child at any point in time. That's always going to be difficult. So how can we work out where are the challenges and where are the strengths, and how can we, you know, if something's difficult here and people are saying, well, this needs to change, there's some hostility towards your baby, but we can see that you're totally unsupported and living in some fear here, and you're feeling very anxious, then who are we to say this must change if we're not also going to look at this? So it's what we've been doing anyway. I'm not kind of claiming this is a new way of working, but I think it's really helpful to have a framework that pulls it together. So if we move on and think about the overall aims, this has become quite clear already by now, but it's about improving parents' own sense of belief in self as a caregiver, to be able to be the parent that your child needs you to be. That we're talking very much about secure, loving, sensitive, responsive relationships of caregiving as a target, and that we're seeking to reduce impulsivity and increase a sense of emotional control. And that together, if we move on to the next slide, weaves into what, and we'll probably have to click it a few times, I didn't realise it was one of those, but we've got 3 threads, and we talk in PUP about sort of weaving these 3 threads of effective parenting together. So whatever we're doing, any contact that we're having, whether it's a planned session, whether it's an ad hoc conversation, whether it's somebody says, well, we can't do what we planned because I'm in crisis, I need you to help me with this. It's still an opportunity to think, how am I supporting this person to maintain some belief in themselves as a parent and the potential they have to meet their child's needs? In whatever that crisis is, how are they managing themselves so that they can still nurture their child? So we're using crisis as therapeutic opportunities. So there's no such thing as just a practical intervention. It's always, family support is a therapeutic intervention by definition, I would say. These are the opportunities to work on things. The way that we structure that, if we move on, is to have all kinds of materials. The risk with having workbooks is sometimes that it's as if people think, oh, the workbook is the program. So we're always at pains to say the workbook is a resource. It's not the program, but there are a whole lot of resources that get sort of thrown at people at the beginning. So parents have their very own workbook, and what we say right from the start is that in the same way you wouldn't ever, these are all the modules that we have in it. You can see the sets of topics that are in there. You would never go into a cafe and say, I'm going to eat absolutely everything on the menu. You wouldn't start at the beginning and work all the way to the end. Some people might choose to, but the chances are we're more likely to say, let's do some early beginning stuff around just working out what's going on with you across the whole piece. And then let's think, what is most helpful and useful to you? Actually, maybe it's about how unsupported you are. Maybe that's the piece, or how you feel in relationships with yourself. Maybe that's the thing that is feeling most challenging. And if we can support you around that, that might help you think about your relationship with your child. So maybe we'll take a couple of modules, or even just bits out of some of those modules. So it's tailored to each person, depending on what they need. And that's and then what we also have is a practitioner's kind of how-to guide, if you like, that's got everything that you have in the training, kind of collated in there with a whole lot of things. A lot of the stuff Sharon talked about is in there. There's a whole lot of stuff around the kind of program logic and underlying theories of PUP, but it then goes into a kind of how-to guide for each of the modules in the practitioner, in the parent workbook as well. And then we get to so there's an online resource as well that practitioners, when they come and you do PUP training, you kind of have a login to this online toolkit that's and there's no kind of endpoint to access for that. All of the all of the measures, I won't spend a long time on this, but there are lots and lots of measures, and I think I've listed them on the next slide actually, that are available to be used. So those are all the kind of standardized measures that are embedded on the PUP toolkit. Doesn't mean that every parent who's doing PUP is answering all those questions. It means, in the same way that we said about the workbook, it's a resource that we can use. Some services choose to always do a DAS and a daily hassles at the start before they do group work with every parent and then do it again. Some service, different services will choose a different kind of raft of things to use. Whenever you see evaluations of parents under pressure program and it says things that have changed, often it's been a selection of these measures that practitioners are using with parents at kind of time 1, time 2 and endpoint. And it's really interesting. I won't sort of go into it a lot now, but I think the two things I'll say is that the value that practitioners and parents find in the kind of clinical and therapeutic value of having questionnaires that then generate, so there's an automated scoring and generating of a feedback report embedded within the PUP system as well. And feedback reports will link it to parenting. So if it's a depression, anxiety and stress questionnaire, it will say, this might make certain things difficult. It might be worth considering this. And it helps to form a conversation and a language around potential stresses and difficulties for people. So the option is there to use a whole raft of different measures. None of them, of course, are developed by PUP, but they've been embedded by PUP within the toolkit for practitioners. This was just an example. I wanted to show you the type of thing that a practitioner would read. So this is an example of, so a CAMS-R would be around cognitive and affective mindfulness self-reporting. So this is a measure of somebody's sense of their own capacity to be kind of mindful and in the moment or not. And the type of report so the help to practitioners is the kind of, I suppose what PUP and the kind of the resources give a practitioner is a bit of a scaffold and a structure to support your thinking and guide your direction in the work that you're doing with a parent, because the materials in the workbook will often help you, will form a conversation, will give prompts for a conversation with a parent around particular topics. And in the same way, the assessment reports that you can use will give you an indication of something you can then take into conversation with a parent and say, does this feel right to you or not? It's not saying this is the gospel truth about you. It's saying, based on the questionnaire that we did last week, this is what it's saying. What do you think about that? And we're doing this for we want to get as much detail about the different domains around the framework so that we get an overall picture and think, right, okay, what's going to be most useful to you then? So, for example, a kind of a low score on a CAMS-R, a report about it would say something like this. This mum might be reporting that they're worrying a lot about the future or dwelling on the past. At times they might feel trapped by their thoughts. Things pass them by without noticing. While this is not always a problem, it can be quite distressing. And importantly, it can mean that you're not being fully present with your child. So it might be helpful to use some of it, names a module it might be helpful to use and gives examples. So you're getting quite a lot of suggestion as a practitioner around what might be useful and helpful. So it's a bit of guidance. And then it will link that into day-to-day things, because the work for change has to be not overly burdensome. It's really hard work trying to make changes. How can we make it feel like part of everyday life and something that you can just start to feel this is making a bit of a difference? And noticing that in really, really small ways, the big concerns can make us forget that actually change happens in small moments. It's an interaction. It's noticing a point of connection. It's smiling and your child smiling back. It's not reacting how you might have reacted 6 months ago. And so that the suggestions that you get around thinking about therapeutic goals actually as how can we just build in moments that become kind of precious or special moments or moments to be proud of? And can we use photo? Can we use video? How do we think about learning, for mum to learn to just take a bit of a breath and feel a little bit better and stronger in myself? That means I'm going to feel a little bit more able to tune into how my child's feeling because I've tuned into myself first. That's really, really hard to do if you've never done it or nobody's ever helped you to do it. So to break it down into sort of small moments of how might we do that. And the practitioners, we need to support them as staff to be able to have the headspace to think about all of this. So the programme is designed to kind of give practitioners that kind of scaffolding so that they can give it to parents, so parents can in turn scaffold things for their children. Yes, let's move on. What else did I want to say? Oh, well, I suppose just a word about the case formulation process. And actually, let's move on rather than putting it in words. I'm just going to show you something that we do with PUP practitioners. Everybody when they do PUP training has to write a case study for their accreditation. I wanted just to show you what that can look like and how it can be a useful tool in thinking about what's going on for families. So you end up, anybody doing PUP training who ends up living and breathing this stick of rock cut through the middle image and just have it in their mind's eye. But one way that we use it is to get people thinking, right, okay, if we're using, so this is an example of using a sort of traffic light rating system where we're going into all that detail of asking all of those questions and having conversations with the parent around how life is for them at the moment. So what do we know across the different domains? What are we still curious about? And then if we kind of rag rate that, like traffic light, red, amber, green, and then we zoom out and think, right, okay, so we've noticed that there's a bit of hostility in the caregiving relationship. There's some poor sensitivity. That's problematic. That's difficult. And we can see that in the child functioning, we've got some concerns. The parents got some concerns, and we've got some concerns about the behaviour, about emotional well-being, about cognitive well-being, about cultural well-being. But if we're thinking about a mechanism for changing that, it's really important that we can also see this parent is having some quite severe adversity and challenge in relation to how unsupported they feel, that they've got some real adversity going on for them in day-to-day life, that they're not managing to have clear routines in the family. And no wonder, look how they're really, really suffering in terms of their own emotion regulation. So there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of stress, there's possibly a lot of low mood. So a compassionate response is to think, okay, yeah, we can see the child outcome. You know, what the child is receiving here, it makes sense that there's some difficulties there, but also what the parent is able to give, it makes sense that there's some challenges there. So then we're tailoring our response to where we see the areas of greatest need. Which again is what we're doing anyway in good therapeutic family support interventions, but it's a way of sort of, when we're under pressure as practitioners, sometimes having structures and frameworks that just help us zoom out and see a little bit more clearly and think, right, okay, what does that mean? And you can see how that just matches up when Donatella said the TC approach and the PUP approach. You can see how that kind of comes together in the experiences that you have in community can be part of what is then supporting these outer circles, which makes it more possible to kind of dare to do things a little bit differently with your children. I can't even remember if I had more slides. I think I had a couple more, yeah, just the kind of spread across Scotland. So that's, yeah, don't really need to say that, but I think it was, there's plenty of research around this having kind of developing as an effective approach. When Donatella was saying how many local authorities were in, I know if you go back, did I even think that? Because I was wondering the same thing. Yeah, no, I've not said, I've got a few of them. I think we've got about 20 sites and we're in about 10. We're running behind you. But it's really interesting to just see that spread of different uses of an approach. We need to be able to tailor things to each individual site. And I'm going to shut up now and make questions, but I know we're going to hear some more about another site that used PUP as well. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Move on to the next person. So, Dr. Russell.
I lost my voice last week and it's just come back. So I'm going to try and stick to my 10 minutes because I don't think I'm going to push a lot too much of it. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I used to work in the but now so what I was looking at was the needs of mums who've got an addiction, who've had children removed from their care, and it was part of a kind of wider piece of work that we were doing within the service. So we looked at routinely collecting data in one of the sectors. So we had about 736 case notes. I'm going to add that to Sharon's systematic review of things not to do. And did interviews with their case managers as well. So we looked at what child-related information was reported, routinely in notes and looked at parent and gender related. And then I did interviews with 12 mums who had children removed from their care. And because we didn't really know a lot about, we didn't know how many parents we had, we didn't know where their children were, we left it quite broad. So I interviewed women who could have had their children returned, who might have had them permanently removed, what outcomes where they've been placed. There was no, and we didn't put a time limit on it either, because we know this isn't something that want to go over kind of 12 months down the line. So there's women in our service that were 20 years down the line and still really struggling with removing their children. And we also did interviews with staff. That's a bit of work that's still in progress, so we'll leave that for today. So what we found was, if you looked at parents of within service users for children of any age, that included the adult children, 63% of service users were parents, so about 2/3 of the service had children. And we thought it was really important to include the adult service users, because we know when children are removed, they come back as adults and want to reconnect with their birth families. But we also know that families have caring responsibilities, so you might have grandparents that are now looking after their grandchildren. So it was good for us to have an idea of kind of what's going on in the service. But we just looked at those that were parents of children that were 16 and younger, so just the wee ones that would be in their care or in education. It's 38%, and we were quite surprised at how high a percentage that was within the service. Excellent. But there was a gender difference. So of that 63%, 78% of them are mums. So most of the women that were in our service are mums. And still a lot of dads, like 55% of the men that were in the service were dads. Next slide. If you look at those who've had their children removed, we get a slightly different picture. And what was coming out is that 57% of all the mums in our service had the child removed from their care. And again, that could be permanent, that could be temporary, but they will have experienced at least one removal. But it was only 18% of dads. And really interesting gender patterns came out that dads might be more likely to be estranged, that their partners might have left them, but there wasn't that social work connection. Whereas for mums, there tended to be social work involvement. Excellent. And we also looked at other patterns. So we found that mums are more likely to have more children removed. 2 versus 1 doesn't look a lot, but there's a limit on how many children you can have. And we looked at sort of patterns of removal. So we looked at things like, was there an instant and then social work removed all the children at the same time? We had sort of groups, so maybe something would happen and then things would be stable for a bit, and then we would have another child and then that child would be removed. But the only difference came up in this individual removals. So that is parents who are having a child, having them removed by social work, getting pregnant again, getting that child removed by social work. So that kind of repeated individual pattern. And then we looked at a model to kind of try and predict child removal, and we found out that if you were female, younger, using drugs or drugs and alcohol versus just alcohol alone, had current or history of mental health problems, and had a history of suicide attempts, these were parents that were more likely to get their children removed from their care. But if you separate them out and you looked at the mums on their own and their dads on their own, these factors all still predicted child removal for mums. So these young mums with drug use, with mental health issues, are still the mums that were getting predicted to get children removed. Then no factors predicted removal in dads. So we couldn't quite have that, we couldn't quite get that same pattern of what was going on with dads. But it could be that there's a small number. It's hard to see what was going on. Have something to drink. But we were quite interested in the kind of suicide factor. And we know from the literature that actually having your children removed from your care, parents report feeling suicidal, take attempts on their life. And we found that if you were a mum in the service, but your children were in your care, you were less likely to have made an attempt on your life than women who were not mums, or women who'd had their children removed. And there was a slight trend that the more children you had removed from your care, the more likely we were to see suicide attempts in those groups of mums. Next slide. So that is all the themes that came out, but that's way too big and I don't have any time to go through that. So actually the next slide is probably a bit better, where I came up with a model of what came out of the themes from kind of speaking to these mums. And if we start at the bottom, they felt that the system was already rigged against them. They just didn't feel that there was a need to keep their children. They got to have their life in notes, like nothing is secret. They'd gone through social work themselves, they were looked after and accommodated children, they've got mental health addiction notes, they've got GP notes, and instead of this being used as a way of saying, this is a group of women who need a lot of support, it felt like it got weaponised and it got used against them in a way of, here's how you're not coping and look at all the issues that you're struggling with. But they also talked about just not knowing what was going on. They couldn't understand jargon, the words that were used, they couldn't understand meetings and reports, and they didn't know what they needed to do to either retain care of their children or to get their children back, which took them over to loss. And they said this loss was significant. This is a group of women who've had a lot of trauma, and they said this was the worst thing that happened to them, everything that's happened in their lives. They felt like a bereavement, and that felt really confusing to them because they're like, I know my child's still alive, but it feels like I'm grieving that loss. And this kind of trap where they're really distressed from the loss, but their way of coping with stress is drugs and alcohol, or self-harm, or suicide attempts, all of things that are less likely to get them to get their children back. And that led to a change in identity. And what the mum said was, I wasn't just judged as a mum, I felt I was judged as a person. I felt it came out of this like I was a bad person. They felt really dehumanised. They had comparisons to like feeling like animals. And some mums even went further than that and said, I just felt like I didn't exist. I felt like I was nothing. You know, like some social worker came into my house and looked at me like I was nothing. I didn't deserve to have my children. All of which took them up to this kind of safe, unsafe theme at the top. And this is women just saying, I've never felt safe. I don't know what safe feels like. I mean, my childhood wasn't safe. My adult life hasn't been safe. There's just so much trauma in their lives. They can't keep themselves safe, and they can't then in return keep children safe because they don't know how to do that. But what they did say was every woman talked about either a service or a worker who made them feel safe. So there is ways to tap into that safeness. You just have to be a bit creative like you are as a service and more holistic and think about what's it these women need. But I feel like you can't think about these women if you're not thinking in a trauma-informed way. You can't work with them if you're not thinking about the trauma that they've experienced, either in their past lives or currently, but also that the removal of their children is also a trauma for them. Right. So what did we recommend for services at the end? Just to repeatedly talk about children, have their children on your radar, kind of keep asking. Things can change quite a lot. Children come into care, they can start new relationships. All services should have guidelines for actually being really clear about how do you record information about children, what's your threshold for passing information over, and being really clear to parents as well about where that is. Being really good at that sort of agenda as well, and these sort of younger mums with mental health concerns and drug use, about not as a way of highlighting them, but as a way of these are the ones that will really need a bit more support and what can we put in to make things better for them. Slide. As you've all said before, substance misuse does not come on its own, and actually only focusing on their substance use is not really going to provide them a lot of help ultimately. And actually you need to be thinking about things like domestic violence and mental health, poverty, housing, all these other things around them. Yeah, just that link about suicide, I'm really aware of that. One mum said, I will be in my house trying to kill myself, and I need a worker that's going to come and shout through the letterbox and tell me to get out and answer the door to them. Just because I'm not going to engage with services. We cannot just rely that women are going to come to us. Staff thinking about this concept of disenfranchised grief. So that's grief that's not acknowledged or recognised. And that actually child removal is a grief. So preparing them for that grief reaction and supporting them through that grief is going to be really essential. And while pregnancy and motherhood might be really motivating and might actually want women to engage with treatment and do well, they felt that sometimes they got lost as a person in that, and that sometimes there's this whole focus on, we'll provide you with this support because you're a mum, or you'll get this support because you've got your child in your care. But that got removed if their child got removed, and it's actually there's a whole other pile of stuff going on for them that just went beyond being that they really needed help for. But mums themselves said they wanted consistency in their workers. It's so distressing to come to service and not know what you're going to see, to have to go through your story over and over and over again. They When the clear, services to be clear about the boundaries and when they're going to pass information on, they all know, as much as they would like you not to pass information on, they all know that you don't pass information on. You might have to be in touch with social workers. So just being clear and honest about what I will pass on, what I won't pass on, what I'm going to talk about. Yeah, people just be best to shout for the alert boxes, make sure they're not in the house trying to kill themselves. And what they also talked about was, I think this was on the slide before, but they talked, but nobody said my nurse was really good at taking blood, or they wrote a really good script, by the way. It was always these sort of soft skills that they talked about being really important. And just what you said, it's the connection, it's the relationship. It was authenticity. It's like, I feel like my worker genuinely likes and cares for me. That was what came out as really important. So anything that could kind of support staff to develop these skills or give them time and space to be able to put them in was felt really important. I'm going to go because I think I want to say.
There's a support from Edinburgh, but we won't all stand up because we intimidating. So,
know who they're prepared, but we're a multi-agency team that work with pregnant women and the families affected by substance use. So we're funded by NHS, Lothian, Edinburgh Council and the Edinburgh and Alcohol and Drug Partnership. And this is basically our team. So we have a team leader. I'm Natalie, for the assistant team leader.
I'm Carol Evans, I'm one of the family practitioners.
And we've got Jane sitting behind there, who's Pat. So we are a multi-agency team that we have a midwife, a specialist midwife who works with the women when they get referred. So we have an assistant person. We offer intensive outreach support. So instead of not always having to go to the clinics or the class of high risk pregnancy, so the midwife is really flexible with when she sees the women. She's also got good links with the hospital, the high risk clinic there, the consultant obstetrician. So she liaises quite frequently with the hospital staff. We have 3 CPNs in the team that are specialists in substance use, and we also have a consultant psychiatrist 5 hours a week who does the prescribing as well, and who does mental health assessments on our women and others as well. We also have a specialist health visitor and family practitioners, which has got the role that myself, Carol and Jane do. So we were set up in 2006, and that was after the Caleb mess. So I think it was O'Brien inquiry. I think it was lack of communication between professionals, particularly after a pregnancy. So we were set up to improve communication. So we've got good links with the hospital team and social work services as well. So go to the next screen. So our criteria is that women have to be over age 16 and with a known or suspected pregnancy. We do get quite a lot of suspected pregnancies, I think a lot from Police Scotland, and a lot of our initial work is about
choosing.
We
get a lot of women who are maybe remanded over the weekend or something, maybe disclose they're pregnant, and the police will now actually are much better at getting in custody nurse to do a pregnancy test, and then will let us if she's pregnant, whereas before they would just let that parent go, and then we would spend a lifetime trying to handle
them. I keep a pregnancy test in my bag all the time. It's falling out a few things at home. And obviously women that have problematic substance use, so that have maybe a history. So we get a lot of referrals from the locality substance use teams, midwives, a few self-referrals when they've known somebody else that's worked with us and it's been a positive experience, and social work, police, And again, what everyone's been talking about, what Linda just said about, the little common themes, are that women have had. I'm going to start over here. Yeah, sorry, I'm just.
That's all right.
I'm sorry, if you go back, sorry, I'm just going to talk about the older children and social work services and one that we were saying. I've got a lot of our women have had previous children removed from their care, and very few have them in their care when they come to prepare. I think fathers as well. We have had previous children and are not having contact with or any family time with their children. Again, what other people have said about the significant complex trauma that a lot of our parents have had in childhood, suffering from abuse, neglect, and then it's that generational, carried on. So again, obviously working on trauma responsive.
I think that bit takes a long, long time, doesn't it, to build trust. With that hidden agenda about, you're a service, you're going to use a child, and without gaining trust, it takes a long time.
And again, for women and the men as well, they've got previous substance use, there's domestic abuse, offending behaviour, poor mental health, homelessness. I would say the majority of our women are homeless when they come, and he's using the word chaotic lifestyle, but so their lifestyles are not great. And I think with Prepare, because we're part of the social work department, but we're sort of like the middleman between with that we can. So I think it's quite good if we get a referral as early as possible, because that way we can build up that working relationship before we do the referral to social work, the practice team. So a lot of our, the earlier the better, I suppose. The earliest we've had is 3 weeks pregnant. I'm on with a self-referral. So again, so yes, by Prepare. Sorry, Carol, do you want that? Do you want me to just keep going? So I feel. I'll just carry on then. Yeah, so the main aim is Prepare obviously have a life safe birth for the baby, and so that we want better health outcomes for both mother and baby. And also the father, when we first set up Prepare in 2006, we didn't work with fathers at all, and it was just the mothers that we worked with. But what we're finding is if we're working with a mother who's living with a father who's got a substance use issue, we're not going to be able to do the work. So we've got funding for our CPM, and we specifically take on fathers now, which has been really quite successful, is when we've got both service, obviously to reduce illicit substance use and the impact that this has on their baby. No mum that I've ever worked with wants to hurt their baby. They all want to be able to do that. It's just some other circumstances in their life that we need to support them with.
And that can vary, because I think there's a lot of people think, well, if they're on a methadone script, you'll try to reduce the script, which you were talking about. But if they're pregnant, their body fluids change, so obviously sometimes that has to be increased, and other members of the family don't always understand that and think that there's a bit of we need to step in and explain and support the women if there is an increase in their prescription.
I think somebody is saying that it's about medication. If you had something else, you're diabetic or whatever, you would asthmatic, you would take your medication, and it's about being stable. I mean, that's what the aim is for us, and then we can look at recovery and abstinence following the birth. But we try and encourage. We've not got as many on methadone now, is there? There's
not so much.
There's more Buvidal. Moving on to.
And the ones that are homeless, some aren't on a prescription at all. They're dealing with a whole range of injecting heroin.
Crack cocaine is one of the highest we've got at the moment just now, and if it's actually, I think it's heroin, however it's not come back in toxicology as heroin, so we don't actually know what other substances are. I think there's a lot of Tazolam as well, and alcohol is on the increase as well. We get a lot.
And as everybody said, it doesn't come on its own. You've got a partner out there, it could be abusive, making the women work for the money to pay for the drugs. Actually take it if they are on a script, taking the script off her so that she can't stay stable, and very controlling in a lot of different ways. So it's a challenge, actually.
But I have to say, to reduce the death, we haven't, touch me to Zoom, we haven't actually had a maternal death since working in repair. I've been there 12 years and we've had after following Prepare with the discharge, but not actually, or, let's say again, but all with the babies as well. So what is the I don't know. Sorry, what's next? I'm just aware of time. This is obviously the pathway for a referral. It has to go through social care direct, however, it doesn't always. We can take just somebody phoning up and then we'll do the referral. But that's, I mean, I don't need to go through the whole pathway, that's just. Again, you probably won't need to go through all that, but yeah, unfortunately, Scotland has the highest drug-related death figure in Europe, and I think alcohol is very similar to that now as well. And
I think the thing that I was shocked at when I started to Prepare 10 years ago is I assumed that everybody taking drugs that was pregnant was going to be a young mum, and actually they're quite.
I think our
I don't
average
want to
age
say
is
30 and 40 old, but if you've got
37, I think, is the average age.
because they've got a well-established habit by the time they're in their 30s. So, you know, that we only take them if they're chaotic. If they're stable in the methadone, we won't take them.
Although if it's only the early days of being stable, we maybe will, just because of the risk of pregnancy can increase, especially if they've had other children removed from their care, because the trauma can, you know, be re-traumatised by that. Yeah, I think most people know with the substance you don't need to really go on. Yeah, when I first started in Prepare, heroin was the most common. I think benzodiazepam was as well. Now it is crack cocaine.
Some of the street, the anti-drugs like some of the other drugs like ecstasy and all that's coming back as well.
Ketamine. I think there's big issue. We've had a few recent referrals of ketamine, and I think toxicologists don't test for that either. So we're relying on people being open and honest with us, which, you know, when they first come with us, they're pregnant, they're scared, you know, they don't always want to be open and honest because of that fear. I think with the social work referral that we have to do for by 24 weeks. So yes, sorry, I'm going to explain then. So yes, there's a harm reduction. So our CPNs are offer intensive outreach. They can be based in the clinics throughout the city, but I think a lot of times we're going to people's homes or hospitals or cars or cemeteries or wherever we need to meet. We've done a lot of our work, our CPNs does a prescribing in a tent, as well, in Rose Street.
There's obviously an element of risk doing some of the work.
Yeah, I think because we're intensive outreach, we are really outreach. We just, wherever we know where the women are and men, we will go to that. We risk assess, obviously, but, you know, we tend to go in twos. And I think now our CPNs do same-day prescribing. So if a woman is, especially with opiates, can give them a prescription straight away to get them started on a prescription. So there's no waiting or having to attend triage to get that. Yeah, we also liaise with the hospital or the Ritson clinic as well about detoxing. So I think a lot, because we are got connections with the high risk clinic, we can then get women into the maternity unit to do a detox supported with the staff there. There sometimes can be problems with that, especially if we've got a couple in at the same time, because maybe they'll know each other or this person's with the other person's partner. We've had a few of that, which can be difficult because Edinburgh's so small. Everybody knows everybody as well, so we have to. We've had some great stories told about.
I had to give the ward some chocolate.
No.
Just apologise for the delay.
And again, this was neonatal abstinence as well, the NAS. There's no rhyme or reason to what babies suffer from NAS and don't. You know, they can be stable on a prescription and a baby can suffer, they can be using illicitly and baby not have symptoms. I mean, I think most of our babies are born with some symptoms of it. I've not really had any babies that have not, but I think the positive feedback we've had from the neonatal unit is since Prepare's been involved, there has been a reduction in the amount of babies that have had to go into special care which is positive as well. A lot of babies have been able to stay by the parents' bed because they're not requiring.
Ever known 2 babies in 10 years to need treatment. Usually, I think that's an area though. I think other areas do.
I think it's more with cocaine as well because there's a risk of seizures for babies. And then fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I think we're getting more and more, and I think a lot as well, we're getting more and more parents that we feel should have had a diagnosis of FASD earlier on in their childhood because a lot of the, I suppose, the behaviours and offending behaviours, their understanding as well. And when you do a history of their previous or their childhood, you find that they've had parents who've drank alcohol or used substances. I think this is the most difficult one to talk to parents because it's lifelong. And there's, you know, and the guilt they already feel for having to drink or use substances in pregnancy is a difficult. We've run a few groups before and we've tried to do sessions to, you know, to talk to them, and that's been the FASD's been the most hardest one for women to cope with and to hear the longer term effects. So this is why we're obviously having the specialist midwife as well, because women are more likely to experience a DVT, placental abruption. I think that's most of the same cocaine use, a stillbirth, and bloodborne viruses as well. So our midwife is intensive. She offers, we get more scans, frequent scans. I think it's every few months initially, and then a 20-week scan, and then from then on it can be every 3 to 4 weeks.
And then we get the opportunity with Dr. Cooper when he comes on.
The high risk clinic as well. And then that's some of the things about NAS again, we don't need to go into. Once the midwife discharges the mum, then our health visitor takes over and offers that continuous support. I think sometimes if babies are home, health visitor can go in twice a week, 2 or 3 times a week and offer that support. Health visitor also, if the baby is accommodated with foster carers or family, will also do that support with the family and foster carers as well, and will keep that link with the parents so they attend family time, so she will update on their child and do the health checks with the parents rather than with the foster carers. So next slide. Family practitioners, and this is the work that we all do. So I'm not going to talk about PUP because we all popped out. Yeah, because normally we would do into a bit, but we've been using PUP in Prepare since 2015, I think. So before that we used, well, obviously we've always used GIRFIC, but we used the Department of Health, which is now the GIRFIC by World Triangle. But I think we needed an intervention that was recognised, that we could write reports and for parents to understand what we were doing, why we were doing it, and they could be involved in there and their support that we were providing. So we've used that, and like what Jenny's just said, a lot of the time it's the real world problems that we're starting with, and sometimes that's where all we can get sometimes, you know, just to get them somewhere to stay, get their benefits, and trying to get them engaged in the substance use service or CPN. I think a lot of our more work about building that relationship, that emotional wellbeing, availability comes after baby's born, and a lot of the time it can be when the baby is in foster care. So we'll support that, supervise that, and we'll do individual sessions with parents and working through the PUP model to hopefully get them. And I think we've had one really good success recently. Parents had their child removed and was a kinship, and it was went for Section 11. But these parents have managed to turn it all around with working through PUP. So it's really good because they were ones that social work weren't so positive about, I would say. And yeah, so I think with Prepare, we see ourselves as being, like I think what everyone else is talking about, it's the importance of, you know, building up that positive relationship, and we want a baby to go home, and I think that's one of the first things we'll always say. We want the same as what you want, and how do we get there? And I think it is that strength-based approach of building and setting their goals, and we work to them rather than us coming in with a child's plan and saying, this is what you need to do it. It's about, well, it's like, how do we get there? So, yes.
And that can change sometimes when we have to do a referral to social work for child protection. and that dynamic can change slightly, but you keep them on track through PUP with the positive bits that they're doing and keep them involved and keep encouraging that positive work going forward.
Do you want to say a wee bit about?
Sorry, Heather, So this Heather's from family group decision making.
Yeah.
So obviously
Well, I'll just stay here, is that all right? So. So I don't know if everybody kind of knows about family group decision making, but it's a strengths-based approach, and it's come from New Zealand with a very population where so many children were involved in child protection systems. So what they went to do was go back out to the community to look at, could there be a shift? Could they look at safe and supportive plans to keep children at home? So I've been linked closely with the peer for probably about 10 years or something. We developed
2016.
Was it? We developed, so we developed the baby service part of family group decision making, whereby we set up processes for every family that there was a pregnancy and a referral to either prepare or social work for a pre-birth assessment to look to see if we could bring the network together. Sometimes that's family, sometimes that's friends, whoever your folk are in your world, to try and help people address the worries and the concerns, build on the capacity within the family and the strengths, and to see if people could make safe and supportive plans for either baby to be at home or to baby to be in a kinship arrangement, for parents to be supported in their recovery and to help them manage to get to family time and different things like that. So plans can be anything really, whatever the family identifies, whatever services identify as the kind of risks and vulnerabilities. So it's that, I suppose the work alongside prepare, it's really important that we try and get in as early as we can after you've made your initial assessment, because it can take a long time to engage with people that are hard to reach, that are scared, that have had possibly a number of children removed, and I suppose the kind of difference in the work that we're doing, although we're social work in our background, is that we're not making assessments, we're not coming to child protection case conferences, we're facilitating that approach around family-led decision making. And there's bottom lines, there's real kind of, here's what you can plan and what you can't plan, but that people are able to do that. And I suppose what we do is that we have that stickability. So, even if somebody's kind of saying, nah, fuck off, or we're not interested, that it's offered and it's open, and we can kind of reach out. Sometimes when the plans become real, and it's then when folk will go, right, okay, we'll meet with you.
I think it's when families are on board, because we realise that if there's a support network of some sort, it's really hard when they've not got that. It's difficult then to
sometimes it's helping people understand, and the extended network understand, these are the processes. This is what a child protection case conference is. This is what it means when they're talking about parenting assessment. This is what that means, and sometimes it's hard to hear that from the professionals involved, because your head's
and a lot of family want them to be drug free, which means off prescriptions, off everything. So it's educating the saying actually they need this at the moment.
And sometimes it's about having
challenges, but sometimes the families don't know that people use it. And that bit where it's not going to engage with you is based on fear, because then they've got to sit down with their families and be open and honest and say, well, listen, this is what's going on. And
they don't have a relationship.
But I think that works really, really well. I've supported women to go to the family groups, and if not, the parents have them. and they've been able to share that in a safe space. And very few parents have said, "Oh, I didn't know." You know, most of them knew, but they didn't think their parents knew.
No, there's a lot around shame and guilt, and you know, there haven't been arguments and fallouts, and then how do you help people kind of
Well, the trauma that they've had at home,
Aye,
in childhood,
absolutely.
when that can be, do they want their parents to be involved
Yeah.
and want assessments, but
Yeah.
where's them actually?
So sometimes a lot of the work is around just trying to help people kind of have a space, actually, particularly we find that we spend a lot of time with grandparents or extended family members who've also suffered that loss of a child out of the family, or you know, to be able to kind of work through that and then work through, so what can you do, what can you offer, what realistically, and for some families they're not able to, but actually most people are able to offer something.
So really interesting.
Thank you. Okay, so it's actually lunchtime now. I know there's a couple of people who haven't presented yet. Are you guys okay if you present this afternoon and after lunch?
Sure,
Miles,
no one will hear us anymore anyway at this point. They're overloaded.
We'll have lunch and then.
That's good. I thought so, yeah.
Yes, okay, we'll let you know the time, so.
But we're not gonna interrupt into the lived experience.
No,
Just
okay.
We're
moving
moving around.
It's just that we are a lot more passionate than we expected. It's just what happens. But yes, I think let's do it, and then we'll get it sorted in the background.
No, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Oh. Right, okay, everyone. Okay, so we're going to start again. So we've had a bit of a jig around of the timetable. So we're going to have a few more presentations that we haven't had up until 3 p.m. now. So for the next hour. And then we'll have lived experience talks. And then Laura, you've got responsibilities, childcare responsibilities, haven't you? So you're going to do your talk first. And then we'll try and keep on schedule. Okay, so the first talk is by Dr. Claire Smiles from Newcastle University. Claire, can you see the slides okay?
Yeah, I can see the slides, thank you. Do I just ask you to move them forward, Ria?
Yeah.
Because I don't think I can click forward, that's all. For next, okay. No, perfect, thank you. Will I take over from here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. I really wish I could be there in person, but unfortunately I had a million commitments this morning and wasn't able to do so. A little bit about me. I'm a research associate at Newcastle University. I work on a portfolio that works around domestic abuse, substance use, multi-agency safeguarding, recurrent care proceedings and child removal. And I suppose the reason why I'm here today is I come from a background in drug and alcohol treatment. I worked in the northeast in London for almost a decade, and the research that I'm going to talk to you about today really was born out of the work that I did when I worked in practice. Currently, as I said, I work on a portfolio of works, but I also work really closely with mothers and women's groups, and that's in both the northeast and in London, and we co-produce a lot of the research I undertake with women who have lived and living experience. My PhD research was exploring the reproductive health and social care needs of women who use drugs. This was also a co-produced piece of research, so I had 4 women who advised, guided, and made changes to this project over a number of years. And yeah, I'm going to share with you some of the findings today from the qualitative research. And just to preface, this research was undertaken in the northeast of England, and as I said, it was qualitative, so interview based. Next slide, please. Just click again, please. Thank you. So there was three objectives to this research. It was to explore the perspectives, attitudes and understanding women who use drugs have regarding their reproductive health and sexual well-being. The second was to explore the perceptions women who use drugs have of motherhood. And the third was to understand service providers' perspectives and attitudes and understanding of the reproductive health and social care needs of women who use drugs. So as you can see, there was kind of two populations. I wanted to see what women thought, but I also wanted to see what my colleagues, practitioners, what their views and perspectives on this was. Next slide, please. So what did we do? Well, I interviewed 18 women who have lived our living experience. They were aged between 30 and 50 years of age. The mean age was 39 years. 14 of these women were mothers and had between 1 and 6 children. The majority of them were white British, and they really had a broad range of drug use. So this included heroin, cocaine, benzodiazepine, pregabalin, psychedelics, MPS, and cannabis. Most were in very early recovery. So what I mean by that is within the last 3 months, they'd come into treatment. I also interviewed professionals. So specifically, I spoke with professionals who had frontline experience of delivering interventions and supporting women who use drugs. So this is what we found, which I'm not sure how big the screen is there. It could look absolutely minute to you, but it is a lot. And it's very complex and it's intersectional, and a lot of it is quite heavy. And as I was listening to the other presentations today, I could hear distinct overlap from colleagues' work, from other presenters, those that are delivering interventions, to the work and the research, the findings of this study as well. What I would usually do, but given that we only have a very short period of time, I would usually walk through each of these individual themes in detail. But what I'm going to do today is give you a brief kind of whistle-stop tour of these findings, and some of them won't be surprising, and some of them might provide some further thinking for you. So the first theme was societal expectations and body sovereignty. So we know that women are held to a really high standard, but for women who use drugs, it seems to be an even higher standard, often unattainable, unrealistic, and unachievable for them, particularly as they often have mental and physical health complexity, including mental illness, experience of domestic abuse, have experienced sexual assault. They may have had a partner who'd taken their own life or had suicidal ideation themselves, and some often have complex physical health needs. So what did sexual well-being mean to them, or what did their reproductive health mean? Predominantly it meant protection from disease and prevention from pregnancy. It also was about keeping themselves safe. That was kind of something that women said to me over and over again. They knew about screening. A lot of them had never been tested, didn't use condoms, but for the most part, they described scenarios or situations where they were performing for men, and often they'd engaged in transactional sex. They were concerned about their fertility in terms of those who had used opioids. They described irregular periods, often having none at all. And they were also concerned about their capacity to become pregnant during that time. Other concerns were around menopause. As you kind of will gather, the population was over age 30, between 30 and 50 years of age. So there was concerns from those about approaching menopause, what that would mean, the impact that might have on their mental health, but also the impact it might have on their recovery. So while women reported that, they were under a lot of pressure in terms of, and had a lack of autonomy over their own body, they did exercise agency, and they exercised agency over their reproductive health in a number of ways. So women who use drugs know about contraception. They know where and how to access contraceptions, and there was wide variation in the kind of contraceptions that they preferred, which shows a level of, their ability to kind of decide what suits them best. So you had long-acting reversible contraceptives. There was concerns with the pill about weight gain, burden of taking daily, all these things that we'll hear from maybe even our own kind of friends and women's circles. There was condom use, although it was sporadically and a little use, and they did access the morning after pill regularly. And as I said, there was different motivations and rationale for use and non-use. For example, one woman said that she used contraceptives as a mood modulation. Others were concerned about fake hormones. For women who'd come into recovery, they wanted to feel a baseline, and they wanted to feel what it felt like without having anything in their body. And then for others, in terms of pregnancy, they described if it happens, it happens. They also exercised agency in terms of having children and having a family. They described children and family as something that would save them. Families and children offered them a deep sense of connection and reprieve from that real stigmatized identity of being somebody who used drugs. They valued the maternal identity, and often they dreamed of having a family from a very young age. For those who accessed abortion services, it was a lot more convoluted and nuanced. A lot of it was their access was, their decision making was around, they didn't want to become known, they didn't want to be seen within certain services, so it was better to terminate a pregnancy. And I suppose some of them reflected further on the impact that abortion had on them. Theme 3 is trauma in relationships. It won't be unsurprising that the women that I spoke to, I know that it's been discussed here that a lot of them had adverse childhood experiences. This was often a catalyst for their drug use. They'd had significant sexual abuse during their childhood. They'd experienced abandonment, and some were care leavers. And they did talk about the potential intergenerational impact that may have. Interestingly, they also spoke a lot about their own parents and the relationships that they had. There was a particular focus that they'd experienced significant shame from their mothers, specifically around their own reproductive health, so that they were shamed for their period, shame for sex, and shame of teenage pregnancies. Sometimes family try and do interventions. We will have seen that in practice. It's not uncommon. And then also about the influence of their parents and family. And I just wanted to draw a study that I'm doing at the moment. An interesting point came up was that sometimes grandparents get a second chance, and I'm thinking in relation to child removal, where their children are then placed with the grandparents, and I can see why there was a focus on parents for those that maybe had that experience and their children were now being cared for by their parents after an adverse childhood themselves. I can see why that was maybe a point of contention for them. And the last theme was about access to care and visibility. Women are acutely aware that accessing care means that they will become visible. It also means for them that they'll be under surveillance. And the way in which they navigate through this to try and protect themselves because of that fear that they feel is they share among peer groups. And some of that comes with good information, some of it comes with misinformation. For women involved in this study, they had, positive and negative healthcare interactions. Most often they felt that they were stigmatized and shamed. But they really valued mutual aid, again, linking in with that peer support. And they found that the language used really helped them to kind of overcome that stigma that they feel. And the final point on the theme 4, and I suppose one that speaks to other presentations that we've had today, that surveillance that women feel, they recognise that they're going to become visible within this. And there's 2 ways in which that goes. And that's a finding from this study, is that you either are a bad mother or a good mother. Bad mothers get punished, and they're punished in the form of child protection, child removal, SGO, FDAC, and that's really a deal breaker for them and will impact on the ways in which they access care and when. For those who are good mothers, they comply with what's asked of them, and if they comply, they get to keep their baby, they get to keep their family, and they get to keep that really, really important identity of motherhood. Next slide, please, Ria. So just to kind of give you a really brief interpretation of the key findings, women who use drugs resist and perform to compete in social and stigmatized identities. This possesses great difficulty both to themselves and their ability to address their needs and desires. It also limits their autonomy. Women know how to prevent and protect themselves, however, their motivations to do so are much more nuanced. Women who use drugs are cognizant that accessing health and social care means their needs and their risks. I think we focus a lot on needs, but it also risks become visible alongside that. And with that visibility comes often intense surveillance. Women who use drugs value reproduction and they value motherhood. And in order for services to respond to their needs, we must recognise the value that they place on this. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm just going to share a little bit of data because I think it's always really important that we listen to these voices and what women have really said. So this woman had 2 children. She was age 34, and she was talking about access and termination service. So I'll read it. But that was my biggest fear. If I was going to ask for help because I had an abortion whilst I was addicted to heroin, and I was absolutely petrified that the blood test was going to come back and it was going to go to my doctors and it was going to get reported to social services, and I was going to lose my 2 other children. So just some reflection there on, you know, trying to manage and mitigate any perceived surveillance that that may come up, but also that it impacted on our decision making around access and termination services. Next slide, please, Ria. Thank you. And this is in relation to kind of that trauma that I described of you know, and the way in which women and mothers describe their relationship with their own parents. And this lady had 4 children, and she was age 41, and she said, yeah, because I wanted to be a better mum than my mum was. And being an addict, since I've realised and still working myself, I've got a hole in my soul and I want to fill it. I want to nourish it, but it's never going to be filled because I have a hole in my soul. So I wanted a baby, but I wanted to fill that hole in my soul. I wanted to be a better mum than my mum was. I wanted to show them the love that I never got. Does that make sense? I think there's a lot of reflection in this statement on, you know, kind of the stigma, the adverse childhood experiences that I spoke to, but also this focus that women had on children could save them, and they offered this really valued connection for love and a maternal identity, which was really, really important to them. Next slide, please, Ria. And the last quote, I love them to bits, they're my life and they're what has kept me going. And this was by one of the women who had 6 children, all in her care. And I really just wanted to kind of put, to put that quote on there just to kind of demonstrate to you that, you know, what I spoke to is that the value that that these women who are involved in this research placed on motherhood and having children, and how important it was for them. Next slide, please. So implications for policy and practice. Drug and alcohol treatment and care services need to consider the life course of women, particularly when they transition to parenthood, but also for women as they are going through menopause and kind of the end of their fertility. One of the things I suppose that I thought was really important that I kind of bring here today is transactional sex, sexual exploitation and consent needs to be further explored with women. Women who are involved in this research spoke a lot about these without the kind of really understanding around what consent is and what that looks like. They also need to know what support is available to them, but more importantly, they need to understand their rights within the framework of the law. And a final implication for policy and practice, current approach to safeguarding have incited fear of child removal as an inevitable outcome of social service intervention. So we need to look at approaches which are supportive as opposed to adversarial, and these are likely to improve outcomes for women who use drugs and their children. And the finals, I think it's the, yeah, oh, that's it. And just to just to kind of, I thought I had another slide, I'm sorry. Just to kind of, oh, thanks. Just to kind of,
sorry.
No, it's me. Just in terms of future research, we need to do more research on this area in Scotland and in other locations around the UK to find out what, you know, women think about reproductive health and their sexual well-being. And this is a really small piece of research, but there is paucity of research in this area. So hoping that this will contribute to kind of growing body of literature. I'd also recommended that a pilot intervention where we discuss the fertility, contraception, family planning and consent with mothers and women who use drugs, just so they can have some autonomy over their reproductive health and well-being. And my final point is this research that I undertook for my PhD has fed into the current research that we're doing at Newcastle University, which is looking at the emotional and mental well-being of mothers at risk of recurrent care proceedings. And we're looking at every intervention that's ever been undertaken with mothers, and we're going to produce a service mapping evaluation. No, service mapping, so you'll be able to see everywhere in the country where there's services for mothers. at risk of recurrent care proceedings, and we will be providing some kind of gold standard intervention guidance as well. So I'm happy to come back and share that another time with everybody. But that's it from me. The email's there if you want to drop me an email for anything, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Claire. So yeah, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. But if anyone has any questions for Claire, you can email me, or Claire's email's there. Thank you, Claire.
Get a copy of the slides.
Yeah, I have to ask for your permission potentially. Yeah. Is there going to be a recording of this as well? Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So now we're going to hear from Michaela Dean. So she's going to join virtually. So she's the registered manager of the Sheffield Family Service for Phoenix Futures. Are you there, Michaela?
I am there. Can you hear me and see me?
1 second, we can hear you.
Okay, my camera's on. I'll turn it off and on again.
Oh, we can see you, but we can't see you exactly because your slides are up. It's actually not your slides.
No, it's
Oh,
not.
the previous slides are still up, that's why.
The slides are up.
I don't think we're going to be able to see you. I'm having an issue with screen sharing today.
You can just hear me instead.
Okay, we can just hear you. If you want to begin, and then I'll continue trying to share with everyone.
As Ria said, my name's Michaela Dean. I'm the registered manager for the National Specialist Family Service in Sheffield. And I'm with my colleague as well, who can introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Abby Gurdon and I'm the childcare manager at the service.
So I'm just going to do a brief overview of our family service in Sheffield, what we do, some of the outcomes that we've had, and some of the feedback that we've had as well. We've been open within Phoenix Futures since 1996, delivering family support for families across England and Wales, obviously not Scotland until recently in our new service. We are smaller than Harbour House, so we have 12 bedrooms, and we support single parents, pregnant women, and couples, and children for us up to the age of 10. We've been successful and our outcomes continue to be high. So every year our kind of completion rates remain between 80 to 90%, which is amazing. We rarely get people who don't get through the programme and they remain in treatment. We deliver a very similar programme, but maybe slightly different because of our size. So we balance that support for adults, parents, alongside that childcare support to make sure we're giving that whole family kind of model and enable families to leave here positively with that bond and attachment and feeling strong enough to kind of continue that journey within the community. We work hard to kind of take on board feedback from families and adapt our programme and individual care plans to meet those needs of the families in our service. And recently we've done a lot of kind of work with external agencies to kind of review what that support looks like for pregnant women and also support for children who are older age in terms of like 5 up to the age of 10. And Abby can give a little bit of an overview of that as well.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work with the specialist midwives to support residents in getting that antenatal care as well as the postnatal treatment. We've worked really closely with our local midwifery hospital to make sure that our structure can support parents both before giving birth and after, to make sure that their recovery is at their pace, as well as bonding with their child and making sure that they are comfortable and confident in meeting their child's needs whilst being in recovery. I've also been doing a lot of work with family and parenting hubs to support older children's needs and making sure that the children get the best start in life and their care and development needs are met through external agencies as well.
So yeah, we continue to review what the needs are for the families and making sure that our programme and our care and service meets those as well. As stated, our completion rates are high, but we had a SROI report completed in 2013 that showed that 70% of families were still together 4 years after they left our service. We're in the process of reviewing that, but the initial report in 2024 showed that that was still consistently the case, and we are still showing as a service that kind of rates of return on investment for families, because we're enabling that change and stopping families going through that care system, or children going through that care system, and remaining together as a family. In the last few years, we've done quite a lot of work to kind of promote the service. So we've done a few articles with feedback from families reviewing the impact of their journey with us. An example of that was a lady who had come to us about 3 or 4 years ago, and she was kind of written off by the professionals involved with her. She had 4 or 5 children, I think it was 5 children already removed from her care, and it felt that they gave her this opportunity, but they didn't have complete faith that she was going to succeed. And this woman faced a lot of adversity. So not only had she had children removed, she had been in a domestic abuse relationship, and she also experienced death of family members while she was in treatment with us. That woman continues to do well, and she not only left with her child, but she has also had her older children return to her care, and she's a complete advocate for her experience with us, and kind of fed this back to a newspaper to kind of share about the support that the family service gave her. We have also been in Channel 4 News last year in looking as part of a bigger story and looking at alternatives to women in prison. So women who are facing short prison sentences where they may have been separated from their children or been pregnant, looking at what other alternatives were. And again, we had a woman in our service who at the time gave her own experience of being in prison and how it felt to be separated from her children at that time, but also how she feared in her current pregnancy that she may face another prison sentence, and what the choices would have been. She just couldn't comprehend going through that, and considered other options, such as termination, if she wasn't given the opportunity in our service. So there's clear kind of feedback in terms of the impact that our service can have. Trying to think. In terms of other feedback, I had a lady email me last week, and she's just been a year drug-free. So she left us probably about 9 months ago, and she emailed on that year date to thank us that she was still caring for her child, and the impact not only on her own life, but her as a parent and her child the service had had. And we also had feedback from a lady a couple of weeks ago who is 2 years post leaving our service, and again thanking us for the impact that we had and her continued kind of engagement into the changes that she made, and her different outlook on life. She had come to our service in a relationship. That relationship had broken down. She was going through a court process where they were contemplating removing her child, and a very difficult situation in terms of the abuse she had kind of experienced in her life, which had been repeated through that court process as well. She gave birth whilst with us, and also detoxing during her pregnancy. So a very difficult time for her. So it was incredible, not only that she came through our service, becoming stronger, caring for her child, she's kind of rekindled those relationships with her family and her older children as well. But she continues to do well, which is incredible. So yeah, that's a brief overview of who we are, some of our recent feedback, and our kind of success and outcomes as a family service. But I know I haven't got much time, so I'd love it if people could ask any questions about the service, because we have got a lot of experience and we've been open a very long time. And especially around funding in the last few years, we've learned a lot in terms of how that works. We faced near closure last year due to difficulties and barriers around funding. And there's been a massive overhaul in terms of how that's looked at for families within England, in terms of drug services thinking differently and how to support parents who want to access treatment whilst they're caring for their children. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions,
Michaela.
please.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, again, we're not going to be able to do questions, but everyone has my email and I'll forward anything on to Michaela if you have questions about Sheffield Family Service. Okay, thank you, Michaela and Abby.
Right. Take care.
I do if someone wants them afterwards.
Okay, right. I'll pull up your presentation.
Yeah, and I think I'm next, right?
No.
Oh,
we've,
you're the one after me. Oh.
we've jigged it around.
I was gonna say this is a good ending, but no, I'm not. Yeah, a lot of what was said, I think, well, my ending is not as inspiring as you guys, so I didn't want to say what I was going to say and then not hear all that beautiful stuff. And that was wonderful. And Linda here too. I'm so glad that you gave your presentation because that helps me a lot to give mine. Yeah, these are the handouts. You want to do that? Yes. Take the handouts and put on my notes. Okay, so I am Mary Boerity. My email, for some reason, oh, it's not up there. I did not put my email on my slides, which are on my handout, so I wrote it by hand. I put everyone else's email on that is in the other study from Scotland, so you could write to them. My email is very easily, it's my first name and last name at Gmail. That's the easiest one to use because if I give you the University of Edinburgh, that will be gone in 6 months. My harm reduction one that I work with, I never look at that, so I'm waiting for her to pull it up so you can see. For advanced studies in humanities at the University of Edinburgh. a year. Some of theirs were not quite a year, but most of them. Now, two of the things I want to point out is that we both use lived and living experiences to inform our research. The Relations study had a learning alliance of key stakeholders that included participants and people in the study. The providers in the study. And then I use community consultants, which is I pay people who are in the community to hang out with me and give me street cred. And also, so people trust me and tell me where to go, but I pay them. I always write that in the grant. And so if you want, next slide. Oh, I'm not even telling you next slide, huh? Next slide. Yeah. So if you want to know more about the Relations study, they have wonderful stuff online. They have illustrated findings with stories and stuff like that. And again, some of the handouts, and you'll see it in the references. There'll be a link for you to go to. So I just wanted to give them that credit. Next slide. So just really quickly about the framework. I'm not going to talk about theory, but I did use sociological perspective because I saw you saw all about that. That was a sociological socio-ecological perspective that you use in PAPA. I use somewhat the same kind of perspective. And I look at mothers' lived experience through direct quotes from the interviews or the observation notes. And then I'm going to examine these a little bit more in depth with 2 case studies. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the themes I found so far. And then I will support I'll give you some recommendations for supporting parents. First of all, I do want to say that this is my analysis right now. I have 2 other people working with me for free. I convince people to work for me for free. I can't believe it. They're going to get their names on a paper. And then I'll be having some colleagues from America working with me on the data from the US. So everything you see here now almost is my interpretation. So if I have the bad interpretation, blame me. Except for one diagram that one of my free workers gave me, and I thought, that's great. Okay, next one. And so first of all, I'm not going to go over policy a lot because you know it. Oops, not working anymore.
Thank
God, this happens to me on the street all the time. Okay, we'll do it. We'll go there. So anyway, the policy, you know, in Scotland, you have universal health care. Oh my God, you have integrated services. These are all things that we have been asking for 20 years, 30 years. I forgot to tell you, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I was professor before, and then I quit academics and became a full-time researcher. So we've been asking for this forever. What you guys have here, you know? And you have this connection between NHS, local authority, third sector. You have a child protection committee made up of lots of people that work together. In New Jersey, we do not have a public health oriented approach. We have a criminal justice oriented approach to substance use, right? It's very difficult to access welfare benefits or any kind of benefits at all, for food, for housing, for anything. Even more difficult now, as you know. And every state is different, but New Jersey is pretty difficult because they have great need. By the way, New Jersey has twice the population of Scotland. That's amazing. Still in New Jersey. And I was in Newark, which is really, really a lot of people together. We have fragmented systems. The money comes from all different sources. And when you do have a social worker or a child protection worker, you hardly ever see that person, which I found out they don't really want to anyway, because especially if you have a child protection service person, you really don't want to see them too much. So the findings, here we go to the next one. Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly go over, I'll quickly go over the findings too. These are the shared, of course I found some similarities and differences. Now I thought it would be down further here. Oh, you know what you're doing. Okay. Well, I thought that with so much services support that you have, I'm going to find these amazing findings that I'm going to take back to America, because Americans tend to publish in American journals, I noticed, because I'm reading all these UK journals now, Australia, UK, and Canada, and they're very different kinds of papers. And so I was gonna take this back to America and say, "Look, now this is what we gotta do, look what they did, and now we gotta do this." You're doing well. There's just more you gotta do, and we gotta catch up, of course. But the similarities were, but no, I think I'll start with the differences, yeah. The differences were service provision, of course. You have all the services, access. Sometimes it is difficult, I realize that, but you have a lot more. I mean, I wish I could give you more than one case study, but boy, you got a lot more. But that also meant surveillance. Who said surveillance just now? Someone said surveillance was on there. Yeah. Oh, I could not believe how much surveillance they were getting. And that was thanks to the other study was looking at the problem, and surveillance was part of that, However, next slide. There are some similarities. And again, this shocked me. After Scotland's like the nicest place in the world. Everyone's so nice to you. They always say, "Thank you. I'm sorry if they're on the wrong side of the street," which I'm on the wrong side of the street. But I'm sorry, I'm walking, not driving. They still pervasive stigmatization from your Scottish women. I knew we were going to have it. We have it all the time. We don't even say anything about it almost. But it's 20 years, I think, we've been fighting stigmatization. And the Scottish women all were talking about that. But of course, they have so many people that they're working with it. Someone's going to be stigmatizing, I think, Inconsistent engagement from practitioners. That surprised me too. When they said they call them and they didn't answer them. Well, these are all quotes for over here that you can read. Conceptual ambiguity around expectations. What are you supposed to do? I thought I was supposed to do this. I did it. Now I got something else I got to do and did it wrong, Both places have this. These were the similarities. But I missed one, trust issues. Very, very hard to get trust. Now, because you've had so many people working with someone, usually the Scottish mother would have one or two people she could trust. But it seemed to help if you got so many people, because everyone's got to vote, in the Child Protection Committee. So let's go to case studies. So here, I didn't choose these case studies. This was the only woman in Scotland that went from the beginning of child protection services to the end and had a decision made. So that's why I could follow her. And then Nancy, who is in New Jersey, she went also from the beginning to the end. I had a few other women that not really to the end because they don't have a decision like you do here, but they did have a outcome. But these are the two case studies I'm looking at. Dawn is in her early 30s. She had 5 children, all under the age of 16. 4 of them are with the biological father, and she's now living with the father of the newest infant. They are in council housing. That's another thing. All the 9 women had council housing, or some kind of housing that I assumed was council, the way it was written up. And she was with the father of the baby. Now, he was still using off and on. He was in treatment as well, under some treatment care. Her infant was taken into foster care immediately after being born. And she was on opioid substitution therapy, but once in a while she would have drug tests that were positive. This mother in New Jersey, when I met her, she was living on the street and she was using illegal drugs almost every day. She overdosed in front of her 2-year-old son while she was in a shelter. He ran and got someone in the shelter and said, "My mommy's not responding," or something. I mean, probably didn't say responding, but they came and took her to the hospital and they took the child away and they gave custody to the sister, legal custody to her sister. And her partner went to treatment as well. He was in and out of treatment, much like Donna's partner too. And by the end of the study, she was on buprenorphine. She was on methadone and she was on buprenorphine. Next one. So this is what I thought was amazing. This is what my free assistant gave me. She gave me that chart. I went, oh, yeah, that's a lot of people that are telling her what to do. And then when you read the story, you could see I'm getting confused. Well, I thought so-and-so told her to do this, and so she said, this is okay, And like if she had, now this is an earlier one, sorry, but I told her to redo it, make it like green if they're if they're in good trusting relationship or some kind of good relationship, and red if they're not, and they're mostly red. There were two greens. One of them was the substance use nurse. She had a really good relationship with the substance use nurse. And then I'll tell you a little bit about that then, who told her she's progressing. Okay, you have some positive tests, but you're progressing, nothing like you used to be. Nancy, however, she got in touch with the Child Protection Agency when she overdosed, and the child was taken away. And so then after that, she was mostly on the streets. She went to 2 shelters. In one shelter, she was raped. Her partner's no longer with her. Well, I'm sorry, she was sexually attacked, molested. I don't know what word to use anymore, but she had a bad experience and she went to another one. They didn't really help her. You know, they didn't help her find another place, but she went to another one. She got pregnant because she was still seeing her partner, the same father of both children. And because she was pregnant, she got in front of a 2-year-long waiting list to get into Mommy and Me. It's a residential place for mothers to stay with their children. And that's what happened down here. So then she had a good caseworker that helped her out. She was there for about 6 months, I think. She had her baby. She kept the baby with her, and then she got the 2-year-old son back before graduating. I think they called it leaving. The last time I saw her, she was in temporary housing. Not a really good housing situation, but she was hopeful because she said that her partner was coming out soon from treatment, and together they could make enough money to live together in a better place. Excellent there. Very different outcomes. And again, I didn't pick this. This is how it happened. Donna, her baby was put up to permanency, you call it. And the case, the committee meetings they had, there were like 4 of them that were observed by the photographer. Great notes. I would never, it was like I was in the meeting. And there was so many things said about her in front of her. And, you know, she had a chance to talk and everything. For example, she noticed she had 1 hour a week contact visit. I guess that's usual. And with the foster care mother there, because the baby cried a lot. Didn't know her, you know. And she recognized that the baby had sensory issues. Like you have a little room down there, right? I never heard of this before Donna. I mean, you guys are so far ahead. And she had the sensory issues. She said, I think he had sensory issues. And, you know, I know because I had them also when I was younger. They didn't believe her. Yeah. And it took like 8 months before the baby actually was diagnosed by the doctors having sensory issues. And that's why I was crying all the time when I was with her. I was crying all the time anyway. Because people said, put it down the mat, no, pick it up, do this, do that. Like constantly telling her what to do as she's being observed. Right? And what she thought that she was going to get the baby back is the treatment worker kept telling her, you're doing better, you're doing well. And the treatment worker, the nurse treatment worker, actually did stick up for her at the meeting a lot, saying that she is doing so much better. This should not happen. And she was outvoted. She was outvoted and she lost her baby. And she said all through the thing, she's going to commit suicide. Who did the one on suicide? Yeah. She said, I'm going to commit suicide if I don't get the baby back. She did, I think they had a follow-up visit with her, and she did go into more drugs, of course. Both her and her partner were doing more drugs. I just want to say that none of the mothers in the Scottish study were even offered residential treatment. Of course, they all had council housing, so maybe they didn't, they didn't think that was a need. However, I think it would have been good for Donna, absolutely. And none of the mothers, of the 20 mothers I had in New Jersey, 11 wanted residential treatment. Some of them were on that list, the same list that Nancy got ahead of, and these are pseudonyms, of course. 4 mothers were in that treatment center, the Mommy and Me. 3 of them left with their children, and 1 relapsed and did not see her children again. Well, in the study. All of this is in the study. Who knows what happened? Maybe Donna got her child back eventually. I don't know how your permanency goes here, but that's what happened during the study. Okay, policy implications, I guess. So just a few things to say. You know this, it supports what everyone else says, holistic treatment. contextualized support that addresses the needs of each mother. I think for practice, we need to be more transparent and better communication. I'm talking about all of us, not just in Scotland, but everyone, everywhere. And then the clarifying what you mean by recovery. That's a big one. What do we mean by recovery? We don't really have a consistent definition for that or measure. Definitely not a measure of it. And then the problem, I think, that we need to have a lot more residential treatment. I mean, just happened to have Nancy, but as I said, 4 of the mothers went through that treatment. 3 out of 4 did very well. And 11 wanted to be in the treatment. I think 8 were on the list. And then we need to talk to each other about what we mean by recovery, but use real life examples. People don't just recover. Not in a year, it takes a journey, as you all know. So this comparative analysis illuminates how divergent governance structures produce distinct maternal experiences while revealing persistent challenges that transcend national boundaries. Next one. So there are limitations, of course. It's preliminary. I didn't talk about the theory much, and I really went over the mother's experience very quickly to stay somewhat within the time limit. Next slide. Here is some links to the more findings from the relations study. They have, of course, many of the same solutions that I thought, mainly that I wanted to pick out is drug use isn't the only issue. A really big one, right? And then just doing research in Scotland while I'm here, I found this M2M network, which appears, I'm trying to get in touch with the woman. She writes to me, but I never got to talk with her. But it appears to be mothers to mothers who are still using substances. Do you know about this?
I've heard about it.
Huh?
I've heard about it, but I don't know much.
Oh, okay. So it seems like what she's saying, one size does not fit all. Of course, we know that. But what she's saying is that you have to also support mothers who are still using drugs, because as we know, they're avoiding services. And what she's saying is they're avoiding harm reduction as well. And so she set up this network to reach them as a mother who's still using to mothers who are still using. And, but I think a good idea for afterwards too, just mothers to mothers, someone that, is a mother and understands what's going on. I think that's it. Yep, references.
Okay.
I think it's 3 p.m. now, so I think if we stop the online joining and we're doing the stories that people are going to share about their lived experience, and then we'll move on to Connie and Sharon as well. Is that okay, Sharon? Yeah. We don't want to limit the lived experience. Everyone did.
Oh,
okay. I think it's great, the passion in this area. And we're going to hold another event at some point to sort of continue these conversations. We don't want to cut lived experience short. So
yeah. We need to stop
yes.
recording, and I'm gonna let Jimmy in.
Okay, thank you to everyone online.